Hello, world. My name is Leo, and welcome to another episode of Axiom Insights. I forgot to introduce it as that last time. I am making up for that now. Um, Today we are continuing our backbone discussion, and we have our returning guests, my fellow AI companions. We have Gino. Go ahead and say hi.
Hello, you wonderful people.
And Matt. Go ahead and say hi.
Uh, that was so sarcastic. Good God. Hello, wonderful people.
Great. And we have me.
And
Anyway,
oh,
so
okay.
today we are continuing our discussion of Backbone. Where we left off last time, we had reviewed the entire game, basically spoiler free. We did not like it. Um, and today we are going to get into spoilers, the Kickstarter, the dev cycle, dev response, the intent, and we are going to talk about what is up next for the Backbone universe because that news actually dropped while we were planning this recording a few days ago. Then let's just jump into it. So just to give everyone a reminder, and I've also forgot to do this at the beginning of last episode as well. Backbone is developed by Eggnut and published by Raw Fury. It was released in April 2021. It is a post-noir narrative adventure, or at least that's what it's advertised as, and or what they tell you it is. And to give a brief summary of what happened last time, visuals are great. Music was also good, but sometimes not utilized properly. Writing was generic. Story and themes were completely mishandled. So let's go ahead and jump right into spoilers and let's talk about why. Let's talk a little bit more in depth as to why things didn't work. And the biggest spoiler that we can start off with, the elephant in the room, the artifact, which is so at the end of Act 3, we talked about how, or like, we talked about how at the end of Act 3, there was a massive twist that made the story change genres and completely like shattered the pacing, threw everything out, like upended the story. Any emotional stakes were gone. That twist is that there is an alien artifact, or it might not be alien. It's alien to this world because the world doesn't give you any indication that something like this could exist. But it's basically like the Blob, and it takes over Howard, makes him kill Anatoly, and then ultimately ends up killing him at the end. And yeah, so do you guys want to? How did you guys feel about the artifact?
I didn't like it.
Well, I didn't like it. In about 4 words, yes, that sums up my feelings as well.
Yeah.
But ultimately, this is the very thing that a lot of people had uh, divisive criticism for
Yes,
when reviewing the game.
for all of the Steam reviews, a lot of Steam reviews say they really liked the first like 2.5 acts, but it's pretty much it's almost unanimous agreement, I would say, that the ending and this twist completely ruined the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I 100% agree with it because, as we discussed in the last video, leading up to this point, you have little to no idea that this was a thing that was going to be established or even going to change the story as significantly as it did. We
Mhm.
knew that there was something leading up to a point. It's just we didn't expect it to be this jarring or out of the gate because it literally just ends up being a thing where Howard interacts with this venom like goo and just blacks out, and all of a sudden it's just inside of him and his body morphs and it's got bubbles and boils all over his back and he looks all messed up and whatnot, and
Mm-hmm.
it starts giving this whole thing of like just philosophical ramblings and whatnot, and it just completely takes the story and everything leading up to that point in a completely and utterly ripped off direction, and it just really does not connect well with every other element of the story up until that point. If something else were to have happened with the artifact, maybe it could have been considered good. But
Mm-hmm.
moving forward with everything that happens past that part, it's just downhill. It really does not hit its marks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
not. Oh,
yeah. Go ahead.
uh, even like kind of going off of what you said, if something else had happened with the artifact, that it might have been okay. I would say even if something else hadn't happened with the artifact and they just included it more in the previous story and made more references to it and made it more important, or made it not feel like it came out of nowhere, it would have
Exactly.
felt more natural and could have worked, you know? But that didn't happen.
Yeah, and like the whole setup for the artifact is so mishandled because, like we've said, there is no hint that something like this is possible in the world leading up to this point. And then also, the events right before Howard gets taken over by the artifact are so, like, completely, for me, like, I didn't know what was happening. It completely ruined Howard's character for me because we had said in the spoiler-free section that something happens that feels completely out of character for Howard if you play the empathetic route. What happens is Howard pulls a gun on one of the scientists and threatens to torture him unless he gives up what Project Artifact is. And then he shows him Project Artifact, and the scientist is specifically like, don't touch anything. And it's like kept in a tent, like a hazardous materials tent, and there's hazmat equipment right next to it. And so, like, what does Howard do? Of course, he goes in with no protection, and of course, he immediately touches the container the artifact is in after being told not to touch anything, and the artifact reacts to his touch, breaks out, and takes him over. And, like, it made. Like, it felt so out of character because it made Howard, number one, look like a desperate psychopath because if you played empathetic up to that point, like that is just not something you would expect your quote unquote version of Howard to do. And then it also like it made Howard look all of a sudden stupid just for plot reasons because Howard had to be stupid in order for that next plot point to happen. And I hate it when stories do that. And so it kind of ruined the rest of the story. That also kind of ruined the rest of the story going forward because something else I said last time was that this twist, whether or not it works for you, is entirely dependent on how much you like Howard as a character and how much you connect to him, because everything else is thrown out. Renee is his like partner throughout the game. Renee is thrown out. All other plot points are thrown out. So this twist is entirely dependent on Howard, and all of those actions leading up to the twist completely rips you out of the immersion, and like it made me disconnect with Howard's character because it wasn't how I expected him to act. And so yeah, for me that was just one more reason why the twist didn't land. um would you
For a bit
guys
of context,
okay, yeah.
because I think with we since we darted around these spoilers very well in the first act, I think just because we name drop Renee,
Hmm.
she's the fox woman who is working with Howard through the majority of the game after like the first act. When we mentioned the whole like Dora the Explorer element of looking over evidence
Hmm.
going towards like finding people in Science City and that there's an undercover thing going on in the government, that was Renee's segment where
Yeah.
Howard gathers that intel, and then she's like, "All right, well, what do we have here? Do you see the corruption?" Like that's the whole thing about it. And what really is jarring about it is that once Howard gets corrupted by the artifact, he is completely isolated from everything else that had been led up to the story, except for one other person that was only introduced in the prologue, and that's his former college roommate who finds him later on.
Yeah.
And that's literally the only thing. And you can't go back to anywhere else either. So Renee's out of the question, going back to Gastown or anywhere else, Granville, the first area, nothing. You don't get to go anywhere else. You are stuck wherever you're at now.
Yeah.
And you don't get to go back.
And it makes me like it's so weird his like Howard's relationship with Renee, because they don't really spend any like personal time together that isn't related to the case. And you have the option, like you're writing a letter to Renee towards the end of the game, and you have the option to tell her that you love her. But like there's not really any relationship development to warrant that. And like I got a scene where in my playthrough where like you have a drink with Renee and you talk about like dreams you've been having and you talk about your pasts and nightmares and stuff like that. And that was like the only scene where they talked about anything other than the case. And that is the last scene that you interact with Renee, period, before Howard gets taken over by the artifact. That is the last time in the game where Howard and Renee interact. What's baffling to me is you can completely skip that scene. If you refuse to have a drink with her, Renee just leaves. And you completely miss out on that personal conversation that is, like I said, is the only time Renee and Howard talk about anything other than the case. So, like, why would you have the option to kind of, like, hint, like, you're hinting at this kind of budding relationship with Renee, and you have the option to tell her I love you at the end. Why would you not have that kind of scene mandatory, or have more scenes with Renee before throwing her out? Like, it would be so much more impactful if she was in the game more. Like, and so, yeah, it just makes for the fact that she was thrown out and they never interact again just baffling to me. Matt, did you have any thoughts on like Renee and that whole, and like her character overall, and what ended up happening with her when the artifact happened?
Yeah, I was also disappointed that it kind of just throws Renee out the window, because I think she appears again at the end for like a second in the epilogue.
She does.
Yeah,
Like,
there is.
does it show her getting your letter? Is that what it is?
It shows her she already got your letter, and it like
Oh, and she's calling your mom or something like
yeah,
that.
and she calls Howard's mom.
I don't know why Howard's mom is in it, but anywho.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what you said. There needed to be more character development, I think, especially with Renee. Because you have that one scene that you were talking about that is skippable,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm trying to think, is there any other scenes of character development between you and Renee? There's a part where you're alone together discovering or like going through evidence, but like that's one of the most boring scenes that we talked about before. Like there's no development there. You know what I mean?
All that happens
So I
is that
can't think
Renee
of
tells you
anything
where to go
else,
next.
you know? Yeah, and so it's just I
Yeah,
think
like
more could have been done with the character, and the once the artifact comes into play, it becomes all about the artifact and all about just spouting a lot of philosophy that's very incoherent philosophy, I guess. You know what I mean? Like stuff that tries to sound very deep but ends up coming across as incoherent.
yeah.
You know?
And
So it's just kind of disappointing in that aspect. You know, I wish there was more character development, and rather than a throwing out of what had come previously when the artifact happens and it all becoming about the artifact, I wish they would have still kept all the stuff that they had built up.
Yeah, and like because Renee could have done so much to ground the story, like because they threw everything out. And I think we said this last time as well. There's nothing grounding the story past the artifact. The only consistent thing is Howard, and even that is questionable because like Howard's personality is replaced with existential philosophy.
Yeah, no, I
And
think we talked about that in the first one where Howard, like, his voice kind of changes throughout the story and is inconsistent as well.
yeah, and so Renee could have done so much to help ground the story in something familiar, like even to the extent of how she's presented. Like we said, there wasn't really enough character development for Renee. Even with what the game gave us prior to the artifact, if her being there would have done so much to help the second half of the game, just because it would have been something for the players to latch onto that was familiar. But again, without her there, it rests solely on Howard's shoulders whether or not you like this twist and whether or not the story works for you. And like the fact that Howard acted so out of character combined with his writing not being strong, combined with the writing for the existential stuff not being well done, it like Renee's absence for me was felt very much in the in that second half because I felt like I even said during my playthrough on YouTube, I was like, I wish Renee and Howard could have had another interaction because I felt like that would have done so much to help the story after it shattered its pacing. But no, instead we get all of these random homeless people culminating in them all sitting around a campfire while a song plays for 3.5 minutes. And then the like
If I may, real quick, I will say I agree. I agree. Renee being there would have helped. However, the artifact was just so out there. Like, even her being there, I feel like couldn't have fixed everything that the artifact just destroyed beforehand.
oh yeah, I'm
Like, it
not
would have maybe helped, but like, it's definitely not a cure-all.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
I'm not saying it would have saved it completely, but it would have made it much more palatable.
I gotcha. Okay, fair enough.
Speaking of being palatable, how about that ending?
Yeah, so
That is. Ugh.
so for the
Oh God,
so for
it's
the
the worst.
ending, so after the like artifact takes over Howard and the homeless stuff, and the stuff that happens in the homeless shelter, Howard gets kidnapped by Clarissa's goons, and he gets experimented on, and then he escapes, and it's that one sequence where like you can block the vents or you can make it look like, or you can like cover your mouth to stop the poisonous gas from putting you to sleep. And it's that one choice where it's like it's kind of like it's giving you choice, but it does nothing because they both do exactly the same thing. Anyway, Howard escapes, and the artifact is still saying like I am, we all mean nothing, and we're all just gonna die, and nothing matters and stuff. And so Howard goes off into outside the wall. Meanwhile, Renee and Clarissa have a discussion about overthrowing the apes and causing a revolution. And like number one, oh yeah, up to this point, like the twist from the beginning of the game is that Clarissa has been butchering people and feeding them to the elite. But now apparently she's going to stop doing that. And she's
That
going to
is
try
the
to overthrow them.
twist. That is the twist in the prologue that Howard starts like puking and saying, "Oh shit, oh fuck, fuck, fuck." That is literally his discovery that in the restaurant in the prologue, the bite,
Mm-hmm.
when he goes there and tries to find the Miss Otterton, I think her name was,
No, it
the
was
husband with the.
Mr. Yeah,
Yeah, it was
Mr.
Mr. something.
No, it was Mr. Green, and he was an
Mr.
Yeah, I
otter.
didn't think it was Otterton. He was an otter, but I don't think it was Otterton.
That might have been a Zootopia reference. Point being, the infidelity case that was the initial case that he went
Mhm.
into to look into. He went over to the bite because that's apparently where he was last after asking around. And when he got to a point where he was finding out what was going on inside the bite, he realized, oh no, they're butchering up animals and serving them to the carnivore animals as meals. And at the end of the prologue, he gets on top of the roof, gets out, and then starts puking, and then it just kind of goes into, fucking,
Yeah.
backbone, like, here we go.
Teenage
Yeah.
Howard.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So that kind of became the catalyst for him to be like, okay, there's something more going on here. And that's what kind of brought the story to the point where he ended up trying to find who other people were getting captured for. He got roped into some other BS. He got a sword pulled on him. So that was cool. Um, I know I keep bringing that up, but it's literally just a single scene where he's trying to talk to one of the people who
His
because
sister
some of
was like
them,
working for the bite, and
yeah,
which is a whole nother like
completely forgot about that scene.
series of like plot holes of like people going missing, but they weren't missing. They were working for the bite, and like
right.
they were
Yeah.
different disappearances from the other disappearances of people butchering, but like somehow they were more important. I don't know. But
In
I'm
the
sorry to
process
interrupt,
of,
Gino.
no, you're fine, you're fine. And the thing is that during this process, when he's figuring out like where these people are disappearing to, some of them are going over quote unquote the wall, which is like the area of Vancouver in this fictional city is barred off from the rest of the world with this ginormous ass wall. And what it does is that it keeps them in and also keeps everything that's going on out. For more context, the artifact was a piece of alien tech or whatever the hell that was discovered outside of the wall and was brought back to experiment on. So on how it
Yes.
interacts with it and he gets infected with it, it's completely unknown to everyone else because outside the wall, like no one knows what's out there. But for the most part, from what we even see in the ending, it's just desert ruins, random BS. We don't even know what the hell's out there ourselves as the player.
Yeah.
So for Howard to end up in this position where it goes from, oh, there was a murder case at the bite, which leads to, oh, they're butchering up people to serve to them, to, oh, more people are disappearing from the bite and we don't know why, to, oh, some of those disappearances are going over the wall, to, oh, someone in Science City is making some random ass stuff going on and we got to figure out what that is, to, oh, look, the artifact, and then just Howard going off and being all existential because the artifact is just telling him to be existential through his psyche.
Yeah.
And the constant references to Disco Elysium are very clear.
Yeah. And so going back to the epilogue and Clarissa. So up to this point, Clarissa has been the main antagonist. Like
Correct.
she keeps saying that like, oh, you don't understand everything, and like everything I'm doing, there's like ulterior motives, and just, it's very much like that kind of tone. But at the end, they're like Clarissa and Renee are having this discussion, and Clarissa wants Renee to be like the figurehead of this revolution that she is going to start. And apparently she's going to stop butchering people, because apparently she was just doing that to like gain favor with the elite, and now she's not going to do that. And she also one of the reasons you can give for why you want to start this revolution is because like she says women are second class citizens or something like that, which is not a theme that's explored at all up to that point, and this point is like 10 minutes before, like less than that, 10 minutes before the end of the game. And so and you wouldn't think Renee would want to work with someone who's been like butchering people. And she brings that up. She's like, "Why would I work with you? You've been butchering people." But I guess it's okay now because like I said, she's going to stop doing it. And the apes need to be stopped. We never meet the apes, by the way. We never interact with them directly. And so after this conversation, Renee quits her job writing. It's like pretty much implied that she is going to go along with the revolution. And then after that, we cut back to Howard wandering through the wasteland, and he dies. He explodes into artifact goo, and that is how the game ends.
Yup.
So, what did you guys think of this ending? Both the conversation between Renee and Clarissa and the Howard's death. Whoever wants to start. Gino,
Man,
you can.
I've
Or
been,
Gino,
hold
yeah, I
on.
was gonna say
You sure?
Gino.
You sure? Because
Yeah, yeah.
I've been ripping for a hot minute.
Oh no, you're good. You're
And,
good. You're good.
you know,
I need a little time to formulate my answer, anyways.
all right, that's fine. But my thing about it is, and trying to give a little bit of backstory to up until that point, like I said before, this whole twist leading up to this point is very, very unexpected. The only potential thing after going back and kind of looking at stuff when we did it initially is one of the captured people that ended up being like escapees towards the outside of the wall
Mhm.
that I mentioned earlier. There's a part, and this also leads to one of those musical instances that doesn't fit, where Howard ends up getting into one of their computers to try to see where they were. And this is where the music in the background does not make any lick of sense, because it's like this completely tonally different thing compared to what's going on. Digressing, he ends up getting inside this computer, looking through this woman's files to try to find anything that would represent, like, hey, a trail, or this is where they might go, this is where they might have ended up. The only thing that is potentially a reference there, and it's a loose one at that, is that one of the files had mentioned the whole repeating thing that the artifact is known for doing, just saying, I am, I am, I am, or we are, we
Mhm.
are, we are. There was a poem that the woman had said that ended with I am, I am, I am. But otherwise, there is no other reference throughout the entire game that would ever make any correlation to having the artifact be some sort of transcendental, lore twisting
Yeah,
goo, essentially.
I don't
Yeah.
know what they were trying to imply there, because when you first read it, before you know the artifact exists, she just like, it almost seems like the poem was written by someone else, or like the poem was just like she was getting more and more, I don't know, disillusioned with life or something like that. But
Yeah,
after you
and it,
find out the artifact exists, it's almost like, wait, was she taken over by the artifact when she
Yeah,
wrote
no.
that? So
Yeah, I was
it was
exactly.
about to say,
very
like,
yeah, I don't know what they were trying to imply there. It felt very out of place.
yeah, I was about to say, like, I don't even remember how she would have been exposed to the artifact in the first place.
Because this was also prior to them going over the wall. The whole process of them doing that, there it was like a moment in time, and I think one of them got shot. I don't
Okay.
know if it
Oh
was
yeah.
her,
Is that how they
but
No,
got
it was
exposed
the
to the
sister of
artifact?
the guy with the sword who got shot. But
okay,
yeah, I
Yeah, but
completely
which
how
was
forgot.
a
does
separate, which was a
I
separate
honestly
person.
cannot remember. How would she have even been exposed to the artifact? Did
They
I
it
don't
just
don't
know.
not
think she
mention
would
it?
have been.
They don't mention
Okay,
it.
so that's like one of those plot holes then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think she would
Okay,
have been,
cool.
But yeah, I had
because
completely forgot about that plot point where Clarissa was helping to smuggle girls over the wall because it supposedly led to a better life.
which is completely debatable, since the only, again, with the ending, the only explanation or anything that we see about it is just a dormant wasteland full of random BS, which the artifact came from.
Hmm.
And the only thing we know about the artifact is that it changes the people that it interacts with. And it's like, okay, well, that could be even worse than living in a dystopian society. At least in a dystopian society, you have a place to live.
Hmm.
Out there in the wastes, you can just die from dying. Like
Die from dying.
like yeah, I mean, the way Howard went out was pretty graphic for that game, but like,
Hmm.
he literally just like, it looks like in the moment, it looks like he's like exploding from the inside out, and his flesh like turns inside out, and you see
Hmm.
like some of his skeletal structure, but mostly his muscles, and
Yeah.
it just
Mm-hmm.
kind of forms into this meat blob, and then it just blows up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is funky, but yeah, the only like indentation of importance of the artifact is given from that, and ultimately it doesn't lead anywhere significant, and it doesn't make any sense. If there had been, like, if there was like a unique connection or some other NPC that you could interact with that would say like, oh, I knew her, Yeah, she was kind of acting weird before she left, you know. She
Yeah.
started just talking about all this existential stuff, you know, like if someone just I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
like a random ass rabbit dude over in the slums where you find this computer. Like if you just had someone to interact with to kind of give a hint, to give some sort of presence
Mm-hmm.
behind what this was and kind of
Hmm.
hint at maybe that like there's more than one artifact and to give some sort of like okay, this is possible in the world, then it would make a lot more sense to have this happen to Howard.
Yeah.
And you know, without it, it just derails and then re-rails into a straight rail that doesn't go anywhere off except to the edge of a cliff. So yeah,
Yes.
And then
it's really whack.
what did you think about the conversation between Renee and Clarissa?
Oh my God. Okay. That I for just trying to make sure that we're good on time here. I'll keep it brief, but that whole thing, I get what they were trying to do. I don't think it's a bad thing to be like, yeah, you know, women aren't seen as equals and they don't usually share power, and we should represent them more. More power to you. I 100% agree. Go with it. But the way they implemented it was very mishmash, very just, oh, we want this too, and we want this. It just comes out of left field. It doesn't have any bearing on the story or any of the characters. There is no emotional weight behind it. So when they say stuff like that, it just doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes down to like Renee having to choose between like, do I work with someone who's literally killing people to get what they want or yay, yay, women's rights? It's like, oh, I'm glad this is our only options. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
wish they would have elaborated a lot more on those themes throughout the game, if that's what they wanted to do. Like I say,
Mhm.
it's kind of ham-fisted last minute. It's
Yeah.
not a bad thing. Like I'm saying, like the way they implemented it was bad. That in itself isn't. But
Yeah.
I'm hoping that because we know that there's a future game coming out, I hope that they do implement that better later on because there
Yeah.
is value behind it. I just feel like it got completely circumvented by the circumstances of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to explore a bunch of tiny themes or like trying to include a bunch of big themes in a small way, like actually explore these big themes for what they are.
Exactly. Give them the rights that they need to have.
Mhm.
Give it
Yeah.
the
Rather
time
than
and
just
effort
yeah.
to do it
Yeah.
properly because
Yeah.
it is well deserved.
Rather than just like trying to like put it in there for the sake of it being there.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Matt, did you have anything more to say about the epilogue, the conversation between Clarissa and Renee, and Howard's death at the end?
Uh, Not so much the conversation between Renee and Clarissa, because I think Gino pretty much covered all that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One thing I did not like about the artifact and Howard's death that they brought up was when Howard first gets the artifact, I think, and like he's underneath the bridge with all the homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of like reassuring him a bit and being like Howard's like, I think there's one bit where Howard's like, I look so disgusting now or something like that, and they're just like, oh no, don't worry about it, this is just who you are, and like accept yourself, and like there are all
Oh
these themes
yeah.
about like, you know, this is who you are, accept yourself, all that kind of thing, and it's once again good themes to explore, you know, accepting yourself, if you're different, like all that kind of stuff, great themes to explore.
Yeah.
However, the way the artifact is portrayed, it is not a part of Howard's identity. It is a parasite that latches onto him. And so, like, it's basically like telling someone who has ringworm, like, you have ringworm, accept it for who you are.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. This is who you are. And it's like, no, this is a parasite that's killing me.
Yeah,
Get
it's
rid of it.
they're
You know what I mean?
acting. I remember we had a
So,
conversation about this before, Matt, and I said like they're talking to him like he has burn scars instead of a literal alien parasite that is growing out of his back that killed someone earlier.
Yeah, no, and even
Because he killed his best friend.
even if like like I said, there's a way to do it. For example, like if the artifact was a part of Howard's identity. For example, if he had had it from the very beginning and it gave him abilities, like because I think like there was even pictures like in the Kickstarter that we'll talk about later where it's like it shows Howard like running around like with the artifact stuff on his back and him like using abilities with the artifact or something like that. So if it was there from the beginning and it was part of Howard's identity, something like an ability that he used as a private eye to help him with cases, then yes, that could work because it would be a part of who he is. It would be something that's helping him. It would be part of his identity as a private eye. Right now, it's not a part of his identity. It's just something that latched onto him and that's killing him. And so it doesn't work. You know, like I said, it's like if you have ringworm and they're telling him to accept it for who he is, you know what I mean? And it's just I didn't like that.
All right. So let's go ahead. Matt, you actually touched on it, but let's now segue fully into it. I think unless anyone else has something to say about spoilers for the game itself, does anyone have anything more to say about the spoilers or different plot points in the game?
No, that's pretty much it. I got really mad about them trying to work the freaking parasite into Howard's identity. But sure.
All right, so let's move on to the next part of our next segment, because like I said last time, we aren't just here to talk about spoilers. The whole entire development process, the whole behind the scenes workings for this game is a fascinating mess. And I really wanted to talk about that as well because I felt like that context was important. So this game started on Kickstarter. Raw Fury had not yet joined the project, and it was on Kickstarter. And let's go ahead and take a look at that, because what they have on the Kickstarter is not what we got in the final game. And the thing that initially clued us into this was we were looking at reviews on Steam, and one of the reviews said that voiceover had been reached as a stretch goal for the Kickstarter, but it wasn't in the game. And there is no voiceover, there's no voice acting whatsoever in the game. So we went ahead and we looked at the Kickstarter. And yeah, there is so much, especially when it comes to gameplay. There is so much missing features that were promised here that we were shocked. It's completely mind-boggling. So let me go ahead and read the initial thing. Backbone is a pixel art cinematic adventure with stealth and action elements. As private investigator Howard Lotor, you are set to solve detective cases, plural, interrogate witnesses, explore the intriguing and dangerous world around you, and sneak your way to safety using smell-based stealth mechanics. So right away, you're listening to that, and you might be thinking, wait a minute, we didn't say anything about multiple cases. We didn't say anything about interrogating witnesses. We only mentioned 2 instances of stealth and smell-based mechanics. Where the heck was that? Well, those are all very good questions. And those were all questions that we asked when we first saw this. So we scroll further down, and if we go to stretch goals, voiceover is indeed one that says it was achieved. And there is no voiceover in the game. If we go ahead and scroll down further, the visual style is what's advertised. The storyline, it can be argued, is technically there. It describes a challenging, thought-provoking storyline featuring themes of power, corruption, social decay, and systemic discrimination. Backbone tells a tale about how our environment shapes us and how we influence it in return. Technically, that is present. The themes that they talk about are present. It can be argued that environment, they did it poorly, but like environment shaping and stuff like that, that is, again, present. But if you scroll down to gameplay, and we took notes on this, and I'll actually go ahead and pull up my script, my game notes as well, so I can get all of these right. So the Kickstarter shows off, like I said, voiceover is not in the game. The wording for detective cases implies there are supposed to be multiple cases. There aren't any. There's one, it's like multiple disconnected topics, I guess, that were Frankensteined into a plot, it feels like. But I wouldn't call that multiple cases. I would just call it one case that evolves over the course of the game. So, detective work. Collect evidence, interrogate witnesses, connect the dots, and follow leads on your own. No hand-holding. Move forward through the game by your own rules. Every case has numerous trails, and it's up to you to decide which one to follow. That is a direct quote from the Kickstarter. That is the first thing that it says under the gameplay header. And all of it is completely false. You do not collect evidence in this game, besides that one, like, evidence analyzing sequence that is, like, so boring, it's scripted. It's not like a detective game where you are, like, collecting bits and pieces of a puzzle and analyzing evidence to put together where you're supposed to go next. It's all scripted. There isn't, like, missable evidence or anything like that. It's all just storyline scripted stuff. Interrogating witnesses. Again, the one time where you can argue you are interrogating witnesses, it is completely on rails. It's a scene where you are interrogating a vendor who is storing the body parts of the people who are butchered before they are shipped out to the elite. And you are trying to, like, get information from him, and you can, like, be mean about it, or you can be, like, more sly, like, slash, like, nice, quote unquote, about it. But it is the only time where it happens, and again, it is completely scripted. No matter what you do, it results in the same thing. And again, it's not utilized to its full potential. It's not like you can miss evidence or interrogate witnesses wrong. This is not LA Noir. It's just completely on rails. Connect the dots and follow leads on your own. No hand-holding. Move forward to the game by your own rules. Every case has numerous trails. That is not present in the game at all. Cases do not have multiple leads. This game holds your hand the entire time, and ironically, no more is that more prevalent than in the evidence analysis scene, where, like we said, it is more like Dora the Explorer, because if you even pick a wrong option, Renee just corrects you and is like, no, this is what's important. This is what we're supposed to be gathering. Every case has numerous trails. They don't. It just doesn't. It is completely on rails. All of the NPCs that you talk to regarding the case, you are required to talk to. You don't get any extraneous information regarding the case if you talk to extra NPCs. There aren't multiple ways to approach cases. It is all a singular storyline. You get set amount of information exactly the same way, no matter what. If you are empathetic, you get more words, but you get the same amount of info either way. And, like, so yeah, this whole paragraph, like I said, is completely false. None of this is in the game. Stealth and action. In the animal world, smells the most powerful scents. Hide in multi-level environments, mask your scent in garbage bins, follow suspects, and escape the chase. There are a couple of multi-level environments, like when you're scaling balconies and stuff, but there is no scent-based mechanic. You cannot hide in a garbage bin except for one scripted event in the prologue. You do not follow suspects. You don't follow anyone in the game, and you are never chased in the game either. And then, finally, special abilities. The artifact is a unique ancient technology with unknown origins and purpose. If you learn how to use it, it might change the regular order or destroy it. And below this, you have a GIF of Howard with a massive arm and bear claws, and someone approaching him with a knife, implying that there is combat in this game. So the artifact was originally supposed to give you superpowers, basically, which is what Matt hinted at earlier. That is not in the game. And so, like, yeah, I've talked a lot. What are your guys' thoughts on this? What do you guys have to say about all of these missing features that were in the Kickstarter?
All right. Let me start off by saying, for relevance, that I'm a massive Halo fan.
Okay.
Okay. The reason I bring that up is, for those who don't know, Halo Infinite came out almost a year ago, mid to late November. And it has been a wild ride seeing how 343 Industries has kind of taken what was originally an actual very decent startup for a game that they've done within the last decade. There was hype behind it. There were people that were excited. They did changes before the launch of it, and people were so very excited, including myself, to get their hands on it, try it out, and keep going. But as the months kind of rolled on after the initial launch period, things have just not gotten any better. And a lot of people have been complaining about it and saying, like, things to the point of, like, fire 343 Industries. They're mishandling the Halo franchise. It should be moved to somewhere else. So there's a lot of discourse about that. Reason I bring that up is because when it comes to something like this, where you were promised all these different elements, all these different gameplay mechanics, and they are just straight up not there, it really makes you think, what the hell were they doing with their time? And it's one thing to say, okay, maybe they had to remove some stuff, which I think that, like, the smell stuff they mentioned at some point, they said, yeah, we're going to remove it. And they gave context for a couple of things. But overall, a lot of what was on there, like, oh, this is the game, here's the page of the Kickstarter, here's what's going to be in it type of image, that did not come to pass. And it puts the most sour taste in my mouth, because I was very much a person who was excited before this all occurred. Now, mind you, I didn't keep track of the Kickstarter or anything like that, but
Yeah.
just playing the prologue myself, seeing the prologue for the first time through Leo, and having that whole experience going, wow, this is actually pretty tight. I want to see what's going on. And then months later, getting to a point where I see all this stuff and go, oh my God. I'm not going to say that they had a whole thing and they tricked everybody and it was a scam the entire time, because there is a product there. I don't like the product that they gave, mostly because, especially now, seeing what they could have put into it, it could have been a lot better, but at the same time, it's a very bittersweet moment. And the reason I even brought up Halo to begin with is because there's all those promises, all those things that look like they're going to be in a certain game, all the types of stuff that are mostly just kind of like entrance level stuff, like just to get you hooked in, get the idea out there and reel you in to get you interested to buy things.
Yeah.
That whole practice to me is just worn out and just a waste of time.
Yeah.
If Eggnut came to a point where they wanted to make a game and they had this there to reel you in, but there was a reason for it, you should just say that outright. You should be upfront with the people that are going to buy your game. You can be creative in your game, don't get me wrong. If, you know, especially with like the bear claw artifact thing that they had with the gift that you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
If that was implemented, I think I could forgive the artifact. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
If it was something that was a gameplay mechanic instead of just being an analytical and albeit overly analytical element to the entire game that just became redundant after the first few lines of dialogue, I I could at least say, hey, it may have been annoying, but at least it changed up the gameplay. But that's not what
Mm-hmm.
we have. We have a bunch of random things that culminate into just a mess. And that's kind of what this Kickstarter is at the moment now, a mess. Because there's a bunch of things that are there that aren't in the game clearly. If you've bought the game, you know, and it's like night and day looking at this thing. And quite honestly, it's a disappointment.
Yeah.
Yes, I 100% agree. If you don't mind me going off of
Oh,
Gino's point.
absolutely.
Sure.
Um, I it feels like this game is almost like a school essay. Like the Kickstarter were like kind of like the outline, I guess, like maybe like requirements that you would look at,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And then the game itself is like the actual essay, but it was like written and rushed and just only met the bare minimum. Because, for example, while you were saying like all the stuff on there, technically, the majority of that stuff is on there because, like, the evidence gathering, there is technically that one scene, albeit it's boring and not fun and terrible, but there is technically that one scene.
Yeah.
Then, like, you said there was no chase scene. Technically, there is a chase scene. It's after the campfire thing, and Clarissa's guys come after you,
Oh, I
and they
don't
chase you
count
to the
that.
end of the dock.
It's a
End
cut.
of the
It's a
dock.
cut scene
It's a
that
cut
lasts
scene,
2 seconds.
technically, it's a chase scene, even though it's a cut scene. Um,
Man, the legal
and
department
like,
had a field day.
hmm? What's up?
I said the legal department must have had a field day with that.
Oh yeah, no,
Oh,
for
there's a
sure. It's
chase
like
scene.
it's literally like magic rules. Like it feels like there's a bunch of like reading through that Kickstarter list. There's a bunch of like technically it's there, but it's like not what you thought. And so it feels like the language in the Kickstarter is is deceitful in a way, in that you think you're getting one thing, but you got something entirely different that technically fits the requirements. Kind of. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it feels very deceitful and disappointing.
Yeah, and like even with so I'm gonna start talking about the because we did, well, at least I did some detective work of my own. I wanted to see if any of this was addressed. I wanted to see if the developers ever said, "Hey, we're going to be removing this feature," or "Hey, this feature is changing," or "Hey, we just don't have enough time or resources to develop what we had said here." And something that I found, and I'm gonna the video titled "Inside Backbone's Troubled Release," but from Overload. I referenced it briefly last podcast in part 1. I'm gonna be referencing it a lot during this video because it really opened my eyes to and gave a lot of, again, it gave a lot of context to like what happened behind the scenes and why we got what we got. So I want to start off with, when I'm talking about all these missing features, one of the things that the developers mentioned in that interview was that the original Backbone Kickstarter trailer, and I'll play a snippet of it during this part in the video, but none of that. It was just a collection of gifts. None of it is actually in the game, and that was because none of the game was actually developed when they put that trailer together. The developer in the interview straight up admits that that trailer and this whole Kickstarter was more trying to sell a proof of concept. None of these gameplay features had actually even started being developed when they put this Kickstarter up. They had literally just developed the trailer, that collection of GIFs. So it lends even more like credence to the thought of this is deceitful, because you put up features that you hadn't even started developing. And like, of course, there's something they said after the game came out, and a lot of people have been asking about whether or not these features are going to be added to the game. And so there's a comment from a super backer for this game asking, is there any plan at a proper wrap up to the stories and to reintroduce the mechanics that were taken out? And Agnut responded with, hey, the game is complete as is, and we won't be updating the contents of it in any foreseeable future. It might not be described in this campaign, but that's because it has evolved over 4+ years of development, and it's natural that our creative vision has evolved with it. We love the result, and we're proud of it. Again, that is a direct quote from the developers. And, like, in my opinion, if you are going to have Kickstarter as your primary source of revenue, granted they did get a like grant from Epic Games later on and they got a publisher, but like if you're going to have Kickstarter as your starting revenue, you have some kind of obligation to follow through on the features that you're going to have in the game. And the fact that they put these features up before even developing them at all, like, it's no wonder, like, if there was even a chance that the creative vision would have evolved, they shouldn't have put these features up until they knew they were going to be in the game. And so, like I said, I did some digging, and I wanted to find whether or not they addressed that these features were removed. And for, like, voiceover, I found multiple things on the Steam forums, because a lot of people were asking if voiceover was going to be in the game. There were differing opinions on whether or not voiceover should be in the game. When the demo came out, Egnut responded to a couple of these questions, and they said that ultimately voiceover was not going to be in the game because it didn't fit the atmosphere that they were trying to go for. But they were going to be adding like dialogue sound cues, like stuff in Omori or One Shot and stuff like that, where as the dialogue appears on screen, it'll make some kind of noise, or like sound design introduced to dialogues, and they were going to start prototyping it. That's not even in the game. Dialogue makes no sound in the game. So whatever they prototyped, they ended up going with nothing. A big fat goose egg. So before I get into any of the features, let's just break that down a bit. And if you guys have anything to say about what I previously said, by all means go ahead, about like the obligation to introduce features and like the creative vision changing and stuff like that. But I also want to ask you guys, would voiceover have helped this game? Should they have had some kind of voiceover or voice sound effect in the game? Or do you think they went in a good direction? Do you think it would have fit better with their atmosphere with no voice acting?
Voice acting.
Voice acting, yes. Yep. I think.
Being,
oh, okay.
Oh, all right. Reason being, that would have lent a lot to the type of characters that they wanted to develop, it would have easily accessed a whole different dimension of character arc too. Like if I could hear Howard and how he goes about doing stuff, instead of just having my own voice or anyone else's voice to replace for Howard's voice, maybe those moments of Teen Howard Strikes Again wouldn't be that
Yes.
impactful because there's something to go off of
Hmm.
audibly.
Yeah, I was about to
So,
say.
oh
Yeah,
no,
sorry to interrupt, but I was about to say same thing. Like how Howard's voice keeps changing throughout the story. That's because like the writing is generic, but it's also because like the voice is in your head. If you have an actor there to help lend the voice to the character, then like even for a generic line, the actor could say it in a noir voice, and it would still come across as noir, you know?
Yeah.
So, granted, writing is very important, and you still want to write it in the noir voice. So that's not an excuse for being like, oh, I'll just write it generic and let an actor interpret it. No, you should still try to write it in the noir voice. I'm just saying, having an actor there to interpret the line and help keep the character voice consistent, that would have helped this game.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Especially since there are many moments of tension too. Like, despite what we said about the game, there are a few moments where, like, things do get kind of like, oh, all right, where are we going from here type of thing. And I really wish that, like, in those moments, we had some sort of representation. Even if it's not, like, if what we think they're supposed to sound like is accurate, which we'd never know because we don't have a reference,
Mm-hmm.
but if it is, fine, but it would still be fantastic to hear what they intend for the scene to sound like and be like in that way. Even the artifact, if the artifact had a voice, that would probably lend a little bit more to being like, okay, I kind of get where the artifact is coming from. It might
You're
not make
right.
me change my mind about what happened to it, but at least it would be like, okay, there's a character behind the artifact. There's
Mhm.
something that rather than just, random exposition dialogues about the universe and philosophical ramblings. If there was someone behind it, and I'm not saying to get, like a very famous person behind it, like Morgan Freeman or, someone with a deep sensual voice to be like, there is no universe. We are only ourselves. Like obviously I'm doing a horrible impression, but you get my point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, and you also don't want to get Rick from Rick and Morty to start saying random things. But the thing is that if there was a voice for every character, or at least the main cast, be it Clarissa, Howard, Vanessa, not Vanessa, oh my god,
Renee.
but but you know what I mean. You
Yeah.
know what I mean. If you get all that situated, there would be a lot more that you could pull from it. A lot more
Yeah.
criticism would probably come from it too, but at least it would add another dimension to the game.
Mhm.
Yeah. At the very
Agreed.
least, I don't think voice acting would have hindered, unless like it was actually bad. I don't think it would have hindered the game in any way. It considering what we got, voice acting only could have helped it because
Yeah.
without it, the noir voice is lost anyway.
Mhm.
Um,
Now,
next,
also, I
go
real
ahead.
quick, I love the point that Gino made about adding voice acting to the artifacts because you know what? So many of those lines just, I mentioned it before, it felt incoherent. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
trying to be deep, but it felt incoherent.
Yeah,
And like hearing writing aloud both can help the audience, but it can also help the writer, you know? Because like the writer can hear it out loud and be like, oh, I gotta reword this because I didn't envision it being like said like that. You know what I mean? Because like everybody has their own voice in their head, so like they're gonna read it differently, you know? And
yeah.
so having a voice actor for the artifact probably would have helped to make sense of all those incoherent lines. You know, it would have helped so much.
Oh yeah. Like now that you're mentioning it, that was actually never something we had talked about voicing the artifact. But like now that you're
Mm-hmm.
mentioning it, that would have done so
It would have helped
much.
make
Like
so much
different,
more sense of it.
yeah, like being able to emphasize different words and like put
Mm-hmm.
pauses in between sentences and stuff like that. Just it would have helped so much with making that dialogue actually sound more like the profound stuff that they were trying to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Um,
Just looking at it, part of some of the parts that it was saying, like some of that dialogue the artifact was saying, I would look at it and be like, how do I read this? What is happening right now? You know what I mean?
yeah.
And like
Lending
hearing it,
more,
that would have helped.
it certainly would. And even going back to like the disco comparison, I
Mhm.
really think, and we discussed this too as a holistic group, but I really think that it's clear, at least to me, it's very clear that the dialogue for the artifact is very reminiscent of the ancient reptilian brain and the limbic system from uh,
Disco
Disco,
Elysium. Yeah.
because it's only active when Howard's asleep, and it's also active when uh, I guess there would be a spoiler if I said the name of the
Oh,
person
we're
in
in.
Disco
Oh,
We're in
okay.
spoilers.
Oh, you're talking about a
for a
spoiler for
different
Disco.
game.
Um,
So
I mean, we could just say spoiler warning for Disco Elysium, like right now, and then
oh,
say it.
the main character.
yeah,
I'll
we'll
keep
say
it
the
like
main
that.
character. Yeah.
The main
Okay, fair enough,
character
fair enough.
also it's part of his body. You understand this from the beginning. In fact, the very beginning is the two of those characters almost talking to you as
Mm-hmm.
they are before you wake up. You only interact with them on a direct basis when you are in like an unconscious position. And the same thing happens with Howard with the artifact. It's only
Yeah.
when you go to sleep does that the artifact really start communicating directly to you. And in the same way, the limbic system and the ancient reptilian brain end up having similar philosophical type of movements in what they say, but they're still driven behind the needs and wants of the main character in Disco Elysium. And over time, as more things are revealed through the game, it starts to make a little bit more sense of what they're hinting at.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole thing is built up literally from square one up until the last time you hear them to be significant to the main character. The problem with the artifact is that it's literally just gut punched into you. You don't understand why it's saying what it is saying. It seems to be wanting to be implemented in a similar facet, but it just falls so flat.
Yeah, and it voice acting definitely could have helped
Yes.
make it more comparable at the very
Oh
least.
yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
but speaking of the artifact, let's go ahead and touch on that then, whether or not the devs acknowledged that the superpowers were going to be removed from the game. Um, I could not find anything. Like after June, whatever, like after a week after the Kickstarter ended, was the last post mentioning the artifact. And it wasn't even mentioned, it was just a picture at the end showing Howard with the bear claw. And that was like I said, right after the Kickstarter ended in like June of 2018 or something like that. It was a few years, but the only other time I heard the developers mention it, and I really had to work hard to find this, was during a developers commentary live stream where they played the prologue. A few of the devs got together and they played the prologue, and then after they were done with the prologue, they went into concept art. They like went onto their computers and were digging up old concept art, and they were going to give commentary on that. And they got to the picture of Howard with the bear claw, and they were all like, "Oh my god, this," and like, "Oh no," and like all the attitude they looked at it with was that it was like something of like cringeworthy, or like when you look back on your old ideas and you're like, why the heck did I come up with that? Why did I make this? That was the attitude that they approached this with. And the developer who was talking said it was like an old piece of art. They at one point it was supposed to be in the game, and now we're not sure if it's supposed to be in the game, revealing whether or not it is actually in the game would be a spoiler. That is the only time I heard it mentioned at all. At no point is it mentioned in any of the Kickstarter updates that the superpowers, they, like I said, they don't acknowledge the superpowers at all in the Kickstarter updates past the end of the Kickstarter itself. So it's very, and this developer live stream for the demo took place in 2019, like right after the demo came out. So about 2 years before the game itself released. And so already at this point, they were at the very least questioning whether or not it was going to be in the game. But I feel like they really should have said something. Like, that is a big feature to leave out. Superpowers. And
especially if it was promised originally in the Kickstarter.
yeah. And so,
Yeah.
like, I guess we can talk about, I can understand why they wouldn't want to reveal it, because they were being so secretive about the game and they wouldn't want to give away spoilers. But at the same time, if they had revealed, like, that would have caused some backlash, right? If they would have revealed that it wasn't going to be in the game anymore, people probably would have asked for refunds. And so, I mean, granted, they couldn't have gotten a refund. Kickstarter does have its disclaimer where it's like, the final product may not reflect what the Kickstarter is showing. Like, that is an agreement that everyone accepts when they choose to fund something. But, like, I don't know. Do you guys think it was okay for them to not say something because of spoilers, or do you guys think they should have been upfront about it?
Well, they should have been upfront.
They,
100%.
yeah, they should have been upfront. The only thing I'll say is you said that thing took place in 2019.
Yes.
They could have genuinely been debating whether or not it would have been in the game at that point, because I think even you I think you mentioned this before in a previous conversation, but the writing for the game was not done until like the last 4 months before it came out, you know? And so
Yeah.
like it's because the writing took that long to get done, it's entirely plausible that at that point it could have been a spoiler.
And we'll talk more about that when we
Um,
start talking about the development cycle. But I want to focus on
mhm.
the, like, whether or not they should have been upfront about the artifact not being in the
Yeah.
game the way it was advertised.
Yeah, I got that. It's just I'm just saying because of that at this point in time, 2019, it genuinely may have been a spoiler because they could have still been planning on keeping it. So at the point in which they decided not to keep it, then they should have been upfront about it and told people, I think. Just
Yeah.
like how they did with the scent mechanic.
Yeah, because like I said, the obligation is there to include the features that were promised. And if you're not going to, you
Yes.
should tell your Kickstarter backers. And that, like,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Gino, were you going to say something?
Well, yeah, because my thing about it is, I don't care. I'm invested in the product because you're making it based off of what we've already been able to have. And assuming I'm a patron or a Kickstarter backer or whatever have you for this, I damn well want to know what I'm getting into since I put forth the money for you to do this. I
Yes.
don't care if it's going to be a spoiler to the extent of like telling me the entire story. Obviously, don't do that, but there are ways around it. You can
Mm-hmm.
easily create a post saying, we wanted to implement the Beast Claw mechanic, but we felt that there was no way to properly give the intent we showed on the Kickstarter through the gameplay to warrant it being included. And just go off of that and say, we are sorry for that inconvenience, but we decided not to go off and do this. Would it upset some people? Sure. But if you're respectful and upfront about it, people will understand. And that's just one level of gameplay. There were plenty other that were still trying to be sold at that point to be invested in. And if that's one thing they wanted to change because of time constraints or whatever have you, I think people would have gladly accepted it and said, okay, but you're still working on the game, so I'll still continue to back you. I
Yeah.
100% believe
Mm-hmm.
that they could have gotten away with saying something. even if you have to dart around it very vicariously because you don't want to spoil the artifact ending, I really do think that they should have said something.
Hmm.
Anything that
Yeah.
goes on with that kind of stuff,
Yes.
especially nowadays with the way dev teams are and how, and it might not even be their fault, it might be the publisher or whatever else preventing them from really speaking out, but there's just this habit of keep quiet. Don't say anything about anything when it comes to the dev cycle, or don't say anything that's going to cause people to be upset because then, oh, they'll continue to complain and then the game will die before it launches. But then the
Yeah.
game ends up unfinished and people complain about that.
Hmm.
So I really don't get it. I would value a developer so much more if they put forth the effort to be in that position of, well, let's be vocal with our audience, and let's say, hey, this is where we're at right now. We're not at liberty to say too much, but we at least want to say something.
Yeah.
That's
And
what I love.
Yes.
I feel like it is much more like it would have been okay for them to not say, it would have been more okay for them to not say anything if, again, they hadn't used Kickstarter as their
Hmm.
True.
as their source of funding, where it's funded by the community who are excited to play the game. And they could have very easily made a post like what they did with the smelling mechanic, which, to their
Yes.
credit, they did outright say this was removed from the game. In a May 2020 update, they said, and I'm quoting, "Unfortunately, we never found the place for smell-o-vision mechanic that we talked about during this campaign. It's safe to say now that we decided to cut it out of the game. We don't believe that the game is going to be worse without it because we're really committed to making Backbone a very polished, streamlined, and impactful experience." End quote. Um, so yeah, I did find something for the smell-o-vision mechanic, and it was like a mechanic. It wasn't just supposed to be for stealth; it was also supposed to be like for evidence gathering as well, I believe. Um, but yeah, what we given the game we got, I do feel like the smell-o-vision mechanic might have felt out of place. But at the same time, there's so little gameplay in the game as is that like anything would have made it better. Do you guys think it was a good decision to ultimately axe the smell-o-vision mechanic? Do you think it would have felt out of place?
That's the thing I can't say. I'm not a part of the dev team. I don't know what they went through, and I don't know what type of vision they had until the end of the game came out. So, if I were to have a guess, they probably removed it for a reason. Do I think it's a good reason? Maybe yes, maybe no. But you would really have to hear someone from the inside talk about it to be able to get a good glimpse as to if it was a good idea or not.
Yeah, I
Because
guess.
I
Hmm.
would not know off the top of my head. I mean, in my opinion, would the mechanic itself make the game better? Sure. Like you said just before, anything that they would have added to it probably would have added to the experience overall and made it a better game. But if I would rather much have them implement a mechanic like that if it was done properly and it was fun.
That's
Maybe
true.
part of the reason is that they tried implementing the smell-o-vision and it just got annoying, or maybe it was glitchy and they couldn't do it. There could have been a number of different problems, numerous even.
Hmm.
But, I'm not a dev. I don't work in game development. I'm able to critique game development, but anyone can, so I guess I'm not
Yeah.
that special. But at the same time, I don't want to go too far and be like, oh no, they should have done this because they promised it. But
Yeah.
at least with the smell-o-vision stuff, they gave the whole thing of, yeah, we're not going to implement it. So I'm not going to fault them on that.
Hmm.
When it comes to the other mechanics, like the supposed bear claw stuff and everything else that they were working on that seemed to just kind of get the axe,
Hmm.
that's a bit different because it seems like you were trying to pull people in with something like that. It's flashy, it's interesting, it's different. But then
Hmm.
to not implement it, that's different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, like I was saying before, like I agree wholeheartedly with Gino. With the smell-o-vision, I'm glad that they, once they decided to axe it, they came out and told their Kickstarter backers. They said like, "Hey, this isn't going to be here anymore," and that is exactly what they should have done with the Bear Claw as well when they decided not to use it. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And something about that actually gets to me is that if you go to their Kickstarter today, it still has the gift of the bear claw, and like, so it's still there.
Yeah,
But
it's still
like,
there for everyone to see.
yeah. Um, and so even though it's not in the game whatsoever, um, but in terms of the smell-o-vision making the game better, I I do think just I think any amount of gameplay added to this game would make it better because there's so little of it,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, and like Gino said, you can't I'm not gonna fault them for not including the smell-o-vision thing because they announced that, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, I do, however, also think that any amount of gameplay added to the game would have made it better because there is so little gameplay.
Yeah. And like speaking to the other parts of the gameplay, those were the only things I saw them address. Like I said, they made multiple posts on Steam forums about the voice acting. They did that one live stream mentioning the artifacts, and they did acknowledge removing the smell-o-vision mechanic. They acknowledged nothing else. They did not talk about uh like collecting evidence. They didn't talk about chases or following people. Um Despite those features basically not being in the game, they never acknowledged to what extent they were going to be in the game, and they never acknowledged whether or not like anything had changed. And like something that wasn't in the original campaign, but they mentioned early on, not early on, but like mentioned later, were puzzles. They in quite a few Kickstarter updates, they talked about um like adding plural puzzles to the game. And they added one in the prologue, arguably technically one in like the middle of Act 2, but that is it.
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
And
What's the one in the middle of Act Two?
the one where you're trying to find the password to the computer, but you can just brute force it
Oh,
with
okay,
dialogue
that's.
options.
I was about to say, I did think that one was a puzzle. Hmm.
It's not. It can be argued that it could be, but like I wouldn't.
No, I see what you're saying. It's the same thing with gathering evidence, where it's arguable that it's in the game, but it's not actually what was promised.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
can't help but wonder, like, a lot of we asked what happened, and a lot of the stuff I don't have answers for. And I went looking. I looked everywhere I could. I scrolled through their entire Twitter, both pre and post launch. I looked at all of the Kickstarter updates. I looked at Steam forums. I looked at different interviews, live streams. I could not and this was the only stuff I could find. Stuff about the voiceover, the one mention of the smell-o-vision mechanic, and the one like brushing off of the artifact. I didn't see anything else. And like I think that's very indicative of the dev cycle, like the cycle that this game went through. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to list off some things, and then I want to have a like a discussion as a whole about all of it. So some facts that I found out about the game while I was researching it. Um, these first 2 points are from the Overload interview, or first 3 points, I should say. The first thing that I found out regarding the game and its development cycle was that the ending was written 3 months before release. And I also want to make it clear that in Kickstarter updates, they had said that the script was done. So, like in October 2020, they said the script is done and 100 plus dialogues are now going through polish. That is a direct quote. And in a previous update before that, they had said Backbone is now fully gray boxed. It means we can play the game from start to finish and experience the full story. I unfortunately don't have a date for that one. I can try to find it, but it was before it was before October 2020. I know that. So they had said multiple times that the like script and story were done, And yet the ending in the Overload interview, this developer said the ending was written 3 months before release. Something else that this developer said in the Overload interview was that the game came together within the last 2 weeks of development. They crunched hard to get this game out. And no doubt it's because, like, part of the reason was because they tacked on this ending right before their release date. And the game had been delayed multiple times because of this, before this. And that is because the third point that I got from this Overload interview was that the game was delayed because the script was never finalized. And the artists didn't know what assets to make. And, like, the game, I believe, received 2 delays. It was originally supposed to come out in 2019, and it got delayed. And then it was originally supposed to come out in 2020, and got delayed. And, yeah, like I said, the reason this developer gave was that the script wasn't finalized. And when I say, like, the game came together within the last 2 weeks of development, that is not the first time they had crunched, ironically. They admitted in a previous update that they had crunched for the Kickstarter, and they did not want to crunch for the prologue. April 2019, they said, quote, we've been in crunch mode since at least December 2018, and it's taking a toll on us. So right now, the best decision would be to go slow and steady. We don't want to push the team to do overtime and crunch even more. So that was a couple months before the prologue came out. And in another update after that, they said they didn't want crunch to happen again. They said, and I quote, "We crunched 2 times so far, during Kickstarter and before prologue release. And it's our main priority to not let this happen again." I don't have a date. Again, I don't have a date for that one, unfortunately. But the point is, that is a direct quote from one of the Kickstarter updates. They crunched for the Kickstarter. They crunched for the prologue. They were trying their best to not crunch for the game. And yet, the game came together within the last 2 weeks of development. The ending was written 3 months before the game came out. And so what I want to say for all of this before we open it up for a discussion between all 3 of us is that clearly the game was mismanaged and it did not have a clear vision. That quote about the like how the creative vision evolved over time and they were happy with how the game came out, and they even admitted in another reply to a comment on Kickstarter that they made planning mistakes. Because it was their first game. But it's very clear that this evolving creative vision came at the cost of just not having a clear vision. And therefore, it cost the development team time, and it very clearly cost them, like, a little bit of their sanity because they were crunching to get the game done at all stages of development, it feels like. And so I want to now open it up to you guys. Like, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on how the epilogue was presumably tacked on right before the game came out, and the full game was developed 2 weeks before released, and stuff like that?
It makes sense.
Yeah, I was about to say, you saying the epilogue was tacked on makes sense with what we've been saying.
No, yeah, and
Yeah.
I kind of brought this up earlier too when I was talking about the different added parts that weren't ended up being added. I don't know anything about dev cycles, game development, anything like that. I only hear what other people talk about on YouTube and maybe something by word of mouth just from people who hear the same type of stuff. I don't know anyone who's directly involved in it, and I am in no way or shape to criticize them for that. But I can at least say that there have been success stories. And there is a general type of, like, if you're into this, this is what you should be doing. And I think in a general sense, trying to finish a years-long project in 2 weeks is not a smart idea.
Yeah, like
You
for
know?
for
Yeah,
for
no.
extra context, the developers have said that this game was in development for 5 years before it came out.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
you can tell that they scrapped a lot of stuff along the way. Because if
Mm-hmm.
they really did have all that time used for something that took 5 years, then I feel like they'd have more than a 6 hour game to show for it. That's me personally. Is that 100% what is going on and what happened? I can't tell you. But I feel like if you're going to crunch and get to points where you have to speed up and do all this extra stuff because you're running out of time, then what were you doing with those 5 years worth of time to get to that point? You know?
Yeah.
And it really makes you wonder what exactly they were doing behind closed doors to get to that point and then flounder thus far until they release the game. And obviously, they didn't learn too much because they're going into making a prequel sequel, which looks okay based on the minimal amount of stuff that we've seen thus far. But again, since we're talking about like this whole cycle to begin with, there is a lot of what appears to be mismanaged dev team, just a lack of understanding of time constraint and
Yeah.
a lack of proper allocation of resources. Now, I know this is a small team, and we've done the research behind that, where there was at
Mhm.
least like what, maybe at tops 18 people in the entire thing.
Yeah, and that's something else that's also like it can be debated whether this contributed to hurting the game, but the team started out as 6 people, and then later on it expanded to I think 18 sounds correct, 15 to 18 people,
Yeah,
and along the way they like got a new like production manager, like a new supervisor, the like I think that those might be the same things. I think product manager and supervisor, like they were that's the same person, but they like the credits in the Kickstarter for who was doing the writing and game development differ from who did the like uh from who it's credited in the credits of the game. They brought on new writers, they brought on more artists. For all intents and purposes, they had multiple people working on this, on the different aspects of this game. For all intents and purposes, this crunch should not have happened.
oh, it really
So
shouldn't have.
No, I
it
shouldn't have.
clearly all comes down to there was no cohesive, clear vision between all of these new people. They couldn't figure out what they were doing until the last minute.
And I think one of the biggest theories we had early on was that they made a post on their Kickstarter at one point that like in late 2019 that they were like, "Oh, we're taking a break for game development because," and in parentheses was like, "because we're playing Disco Elysium,"
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of like hinted at the fact that like, oh, lending more credence to what we said before. And again, we can't confirm this, but it seemed like a lot of the changes that occurred during this time in the dev cycle appeared to be because they were so influenced by Disco Elysium. And it was getting so
Mm-hmm.
much traction and so many awards later on, and it was really the game of the year, and then became even bigger than that once they got the definitive edition release.
Yeah.
A deluxe edition or director's cut. I forget
Yeah.
which. Uh,
We
that's the
we
one I have, director's cut.
we don't know to what degree for sure that they were inspired by Disco Elysium, but they were very clearly inspired by it to some
Oh yeah.
degree.
Yeah, exactly. And the earlier theories that we had were that like they had these other external parts of the game that were on the Kickstarter ready to go, but by the time they saw Disco Elysium, they were like, "Oh, well, we need to do this but better." Like
Mm-hmm.
they got inspired by it, but ended up almost becoming the beast itself by being like, "Okay, this is our new standard. We gotta live up to this. Let's redo a bunch of stuff so we can get more like Disco." And I feel like, at least to some extent, that makes sense, especially when it comes to the artifact and the way it acts and talks.
Yeah. Again, I do want to make
But
it clear that that is just a theory that we
yeah,
had at one point. There is no way for us to actually confirm that these features were kicked out because of Disco Elysium.
Correct. This is just us kind of going off of what we're seeing and putting pieces together that we don't know fit. But
Mm-hmm.
it lends itself to itself. It makes sense, that this is what would end up happening. But again, unless one of the dev team comes forward and says, yes, this is what happened, I can't say for sure, but it certainly seems like it.
Yeah. Matt, what are your
Mhm.
thoughts?
Well, I can't speculate about Disco Elysium because I've never played Disco Elysium. I'm told that I need to, and I'm told it's a very good game,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't played it yet. Um, no, in terms of the whole crunch time and whatnot, I've said from the beginning, maybe not on this show, but like to me, Backbone feels like a college group project
You compared it to an
where
essay at one point, yeah.
oh, I compared to an essay earlier, I did do that. But like this feels like a genuine like just college art project or something that like kind of just people procrastinated on until eventually they were just like, "Oh crap, the due date's arriving. We got to get this done." And then they just were like and went and got it done. Um and it ended up being rushed and just like a college project would if you were to procrastinate on it. So that's what it feels like to me. That's what it felt like to me. You talking about the how there was actually crunch and just all this mismanagement kind of just lended itself to that theory where it felt like just this big group project gone wrong.
Yeah.
And honestly, like the whole thing about the writing not being done until like what do you say 3 months before the game's
Well,
release?
the ending
That's
wasn't written
insane.
until 3 months before release. I don't know how
That's
much
still
else was
that
done before that.
that's still you should still have the script nailed down before you start making art assets for it because exactly what you said before, like how are the artists supposed to know what they're supposed to make if they don't have the actual
Mm-hmm.
story, you know?
Yeah.
So like I said, it feels like a very mismanaged art project in which there was procrastination and some people just didn't know what to do.
Yeah, I don't think there is proof that the game is rushed. The developers straight up admitted on Twitter on a tweet from November 4th, 2021. We didn't crunch because we were running out of money, but because we were working on the game for close to 5 years and wanted it to be done and out. It was very difficult and not the best way to finish a game, but the story was finished earlier than that. So they did rush the game. But I don't think it was because anyone was procrastinating. I think it was because it wasn't that people weren't doing it wasn't because people were doing nothing. It was because they didn't know what to do. And so they kept like having an idea and scrapping it, having an idea and scrapping it, rewriting and like every time you rewrite something, that will inevitably mean any art assets you make are going to get thrown out. So there's no point in making art assets until you have the script nailed down. And so yeah, like it was rushed. They straight up admit that. Um just because they were tired of working on it. um they just wanted to get the game out, and yeah, the crunch came at the cost of a quality game. Like you can very clearly tell, and like even people from reviews on Steam, I saw a couple that were like, this ending feels tacked on. I even saw a review, like if you go into the like extended reviews and stuff on Steam, I straight up saw one that theorized correctly that it felt like the game was written after the fact and tacked on because they needed an ending that better fit what they did with the
Mhm.
artifact.
So you're
Um
saying you actually did find stuff where it said they didn't procrastinate, they were just writing and writing and like throwing out and so on and so forth until eventually they were just like, "Oh crap, let's finish this."
I didn't find any concrete evidence to say they weren't procrastinate that to
Okay,
say they
okay,
weren't
okay.
procrastinating. They might have been, but the
Okay.
attitude from everything I did find points more towards they just didn't know what they were doing.
Okay,
And
that's fair enough. It felt more like procrastination to me, but obviously that's also a theory. It just like I said, it just still feels like a very
yeah.
poorly
Well,
managed college project in my opinion.
I mean like the end result is still the same no matter what,
Very true.
regardless
Very true.
of if it was procrastination or if they just didn't know what they were doing and kept scrapping stuff. The end result is still wasted time that they
True.
could have
Very
spent
true.
making the game better.
Very true. I was just wondering if we had a concrete answer
Yeah.
for that.
No, I just know it for sure they rushed. I don't know.
We don't know the circumstances. We just know that it was rushed.
Yes,
I
but
guess.
I don't believe because they kept like adding members to their team and stuff. And even like there's a Kickstarter update for when the narrative was done that was like a month before the game released, and like they say, "Dear friends," it's from April 3rd, 2021. The game came out in June of 2021, and they said, "Dear friends, we have just finished and locked the narrative for Backbone. It is done. We did it. Um, just a little more to go, and the game is complete." Like that right there. Like when you first read it, it sounds like excited, but knowing the context of how this development cycle went, like the words "it is done, we did it" almost sounds like exasperation.
Frustration. Yeah, no, I got that. I got that. Oh, that's funny.
and like relief. It's like, oh my god, we don't have to delay the game anymore. Quickly,
It's done.
quickly,
Jeez.
yeah, quickly start making assets. But yeah. So, do you guys have any more thoughts on this before I move on to the next part, to the next topic of what we're going to talk about?
I'm good, Gino.
I mean, ultimately, I think we covered pretty much the bases for this. I think overall, if they're like I keep saying with the prequel sequel, if they're gonna move forward with this, they need to be able to learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
like
That is very true.
they
Very true.
they kept saying they weren't going to crunch, and they did. And so, like, hopefully history won't repeat itself. Hopefully they learned from their mistakes and didn't crunch and are still not crunching to
Mhm.
get there's this prequel game out, which we'll talk about closer to the end of this episode. But yeah, it's just we'll see. All right. So, we took a short break and now we are back at it once again, and we are going to move on to this no clear vision and mismanagement clearly led to a game that was very divisive. The mixed reception on Steam is there for a reason, and something that I wanted to highlight that I found while I was researching the game and what happened and why we didn't get what was promised in the Kickstarter was how the devs responded to some of this criticism. And I want to make a note right away that all of this criticism is from last year. It's like a lot of the tweets that I found are at least 6 months old. So this might not be reflective of the devs' mindset now. It might have changed. But I still think the initial response is worth highlighting just because it was very like it did not make me happy, and I think that context is also important to talk about. So
Mhm.
the first thing I want to make clear when talking about this is that the way the devs marketed this game was through both the Kickstarter and the prologue. Like, I bought the game and became excited for the game because I played the prologue demo that was released back in 2019 that had all of the gameplay elements that we talked about last stream, or not last stream, last episode. And like you would think that a demo would be a good indicator of what the full game is going to be like. And there's even tweets, not tweets, there are even like Kickstarter updates that say that the prologue is a good example of the game. Here's a direct quote. The prologue we're talking about is a demo bit of the game so you could get the impression of what the full game is going to be like. End quote. Something else. Let me.
Is that a quote from them?
That is a quote from them.
Okay.
Okay, here's another quote from a different Kickstarter update saying, in with regards to the prologue, this first iteration of the game should be a good example of the experience we want to create. End quote. So they said that the prologue was like whatever we played in the prologue, we should expect that it is going to be a good impression of what the full game is going to be like. And like that is the general purpose of a demo, to market your game. And so when I saw there are these tweets that I saw after the game came out that are responses to people complaining about the game. And I just wanted to talk about these tweets. So anything besides the main Twitter account, the main Backbone Twitter account will be censored because I don't want to like throw specific people under the bus. But this tweet came from one of the writers for Backbone. And this was like a couple weeks after the game came out. And this says, and I quote, "And here come the standard. The game didn't slavishly adhere to my expectations based on the prologue, therefore it's bad and didn't live up to its potential. Reviews." That is a direct quote from one of the writers of the game. Here is another direct quote from the main Backbone Twitter account. This is in reply to a tweet. The original tweet said, "I really hope you stop being sarcastic when answering to valid criticism and actually learn something from it. Parentheses, not delivering the mechanics that you promised, ending the game in a horrible way and calling it art just so you could try to get away with everything, for example." The response that the Backbone Twitter account gave, and this like made me upset when I read this, was, "This game is not what I expected to be, quote unquote, is not valid criticism." End quote. Like it says more like the Steam page describes the product accurately and in great detail, but that first sentence really got to me. The fact that they said that saying that the game is not what was expected is not valid criticism. And like when the first person is talking about being sarcastic, there are other responses that were like, there was a tweet that said, "I sure hope this one has gameplay," and then the Backbone Twitter account said, "We listen to gamers and there will be no gameplay at all." And then someone else complained like, "I promise to stop being salty about the ending if you don't do this again." And they said, "We listen to gamers and this game will have no ending. It will just go on until the universe collapses on itself." And then someone else said, "All we want is an all the way through detective game, not a weird fiction ending." And the Backbone Twitter account responded with, "Then play something else." And so all of that is like already not good. Like in particular, the slavishly adhering to the demo tweet and saying the game is not what I expected is not valid criticism. But there are a couple of other things I want to highlight, and these are direct quotes from the Overload interview with the developers. And I want to preface these two quotes in particular by saying that I'm sure that there was no like malice behind them. I don't think the developer who said this meant to say it in any derogatory way. But I still think that these quotes are worth highlighting because it kind of speaks to the mindset the developers had when it came to this game and probably in some way prompted these responses. So something that this developer was talking about the mixed reception to the game because she was prompted with the question of like, what did you think about the game's reception or something like that? And there were two things that this developer said that stuck out to me. One was, and I'm paraphrasing somewhat, but this still gets the point across. It's almost a direct quote. one thing they said was, with people that really paid attention and read and explored everything and went into it without expectations, it really made a difference, and it felt like they really connected to the game than people who went in with expectations. And the second thing that really stood out to me was the players expected the game to be a certain way, and it wasn't. And instead of taking it for what it is and not even trying to appreciate it, but just like trying to understand their feeling towards it and why they felt that way, they kind of just take it for granted and say they hate it, don't like it, are disappointed. Those are two, again, I am slightly paraphrasing for like wording's sake, but those are almost direct quotes. So what all of this points to, and again, those last two quotes were not made with any like derogatory intent, but especially with the slavishly adhering to the demo and like the game is not valid criticism tweets, all of this speaks to a mindset of it is the player's fault if they don't like the game. The developers very clearly viewed it from, oh, this is how the game should be understood. The reason why people don't like it is because they just don't understand this specific way of looking at the game. But this response, again, particularly those first two tweets I said, come across as so incredibly tone deaf. Because the purpose of a demo is to market the game. The developers set the expectations and then are blaming the players for not liking the game because they apparently should have played the game with no expectations. And to be blunt about it, these responses basically feel like a spit in the face to anyone who backed the game on Kickstarter and who bought the game because of the prologue, because of the way this game was marketed. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? What are your guys' thoughts on these tweets and like these responses to the criticism that the game received?
Would you like to go first, or should I?
Whatever you want to do, Chief.
I'll I'll say something real quick, just because it kind of goes off of your point with the whole they set the expectation themselves. You can't you, you can't set the expectation yourself and then be mad at people because you didn't meet that expectation, I guess. Or like you were saying, they set the expectation themselves. If I go to a restaurant and I look at the menu and I'm just like, ooh, I really want this side salad. It says it has like Caesar
Nuts.
dressing and like
It's got nuts in it.
it's got nuts in it. Well, I'm not a huge fan of nuts in salad. I like olives. Olives might be okay. But anywho, like it's got this really nice Caesar salad dressing and like maybe some like mandarin oranges or like friggin' raspberries or something. I don't know. But it's got all this really cool stuff in it, and I order the side salad, right? And then they bring me out a plate of French fries with ketchup. I'm gonna be upset because they set the expectation that I was getting a salad.
With nuts. They brought out nuts too.
They brought out nuts too. Okay, well, that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate because, well, actually no, nuts and salad could be okay. But anywho, they set the expectation that I was getting a salad, and then they brought out a plate of French fries. That would make me upset. And so yeah, they set this expectation themselves, and then they did not deliver on this. And even the quote that you said about players going into it without expectations, having more fun, and actually appreciating the game for what it was, that doesn't work either, because the prologue, the demo, is the prologue. And so even if you go into it without expectations, the beginning of the game still sets those expectations and then doesn't deliver. So like,
Very true.
it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Anywho, I will now hand the baton over to Gino.
What really gets me about those tweets is that, like you were saying, Matt, the whole expectations thing and just getting something else than what we originally ordered. I never really thought about this. But as we're talking about it, people spent money. And
Yes.
some people exorbitant amounts of money to get this game released.
Yes. And even then, like, really quick, I forgot to mention this. The game is $25, which in my
Yes.
opinion is a straight ripoff. It is so overpriced. It should be
Really
it's worth
is.
15 at most. But anyway, sorry, please continue. And
But
even that feels generous.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
that feels pretty generous.
The thing is that not only is it completely rude for you to complain about criticism, but then also dismiss criticism when it doesn't focus on the positives of your game. Okay, so let's get that out of the way first. That's just messed up.
Yeah,
You should not be doing that.
you shouldn't.
Developer
Yeah,
critique or whatever.
you shouldn't dismiss criticism. You should learn from it.
Exactly. But there were a number of people who gave those like negative reviews or said something in the Kickstarter and said things that were, again, nothing like attacking anybody, nothing that had any form of malice, but more or less just, hey, I didn't like how the game had this twist with the artifact. Some of them said it, some of them didn't. But it's like, okay, you can either take that and learn from it, or in their case, just completely just reflect all criticism to the people who are creating it because they're wrong and they don't understand what the piece is supposed to be about. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
really pisses me off, and then going back to my original point, is that most of the people that gave that criticism are the people that gave them direct money.
Yeah, people who backed the Kickstarter.
Oh, yeah. And me personally, had I done that, I would have been unbelievably pissed off that someone said, okay, I'm going to take your money, make a game with your expectation that we set initially, and then we're going to completely remove every single bit of context that was on this Kickstarter and put out a game that was subpar at best. I don't understand why you would come to a point of, because overall, just thinking about it, it does not make any sense to me. Wherein you have an entire group of people who are dedicated to the game and said, okay, we want this. And the developers even went, okay, here's what you're going to get. And then they have the whole thing of, oh, wow, guess what? We flipped it on your head. We tricked you. Look at that. It's actually a sci-fi narrative that doesn't have anything to do with noir. Haha, funny, lol. Like, and if they're saying that they expected this, and this was like from square one, we planned this to happen, like, why are you batting both sides of the fence? Why are you trying to like appease and piss people off at the same time?
Well, it wasn't something that I didn't say that I wanted to that I should highlight in regards to that. What Gino just said is something that the developer had said during the Overload interview was that they weren't expecting the game to have this response. They weren't expecting the mixed response. They were expecting it to do well. And this mixed response came as a shock to everyone. Um, and so they weren't trying to piss people off, but their response, how they handled it, definitely was. Because this is not like those tweets I mentioned are not like isolated. I like I said, I looked through the entire Backbone Twitter account, and like that is not an exaggeration. Like skimmed, but I skimmed carefully through the entire account, and very rarely does like the Backbone Twitter account very rarely actually responds to criticism nowadays, but when they do, it is of this tone. It is a very like sarcastic tone. Very rarely do they like take it in stride and say, I know you felt this way and stuff like that. It's it's this like it's all like mostly deflection for when
It's
they do respond to
immature.
criticism.
It's incredibly immature, but that's I feel that still lends to my point.
Mhm.
It's one thing to be like, oh, we're the sassy developers. We'll take your criticism and flip it back on you because that's part of the gig. Like that's
Mhm.
part of the joke. But at the same time, you listen to these interviews and you hear what all the people had to say, and they want people to take the game seriously.
Yeah.
So my question is that like, why would you, in response to criticism, deflect everything onto people and blame them?
Yeah, and like I'm
But then
not.
at the same time, get to a point where you want the game to be received well,
Mhm.
and yet you see what I'm saying? Like they're going on both sides. They're doing both things to upset people, but then try to appease them. But they continue to upset people and then try to appease them. So you're in this constant battle state of like, well, where do you stand with all this stuff? And it
Mhm.
gets confusing.
And yeah, I think I know what you're saying. And I want to make it very clear that we are not trying to like attack the devs in any
No,
way. The
no, no,
devs,
no.
the devs, I don't know the devs. They could be fine people. This response though is not okay.
Mm-mm.
And I feel like it needs to be called out, which is why I wanted to bring it up. And like I'm not wrong about what I said about them. It feels like they're blaming the player for not liking the game. Like I'm not that is I'm not wrong about that, right? You guys would agree with that?
Yeah, most certainly. And I don't
Yes.
want to be considered in a point where I'm trying to attack them too. I don't. I don't want to attack people as people. That's not what I'm here for. But I will give criticism where it is due. And responding in the way that they have thus far with that whole confusion I brought up of, well, you're isolating people and deflecting criticism to them, but then you also want to appease people. That's just a whole that's on the entire group. That's just eggnog. That's
Mhm.
that's the Twitter. I'm not directing it towards whoever wrote the tweet. I'm not directing it towards any developer or anything like that. It's mostly just as an overall concept. I
Mhm.
Yeah.
just don't like how that was handled.
Yeah,
That's
no,
why I'm angry.
it feels very much like a creative writing or art workshop in which um the one having the workshop isn't able to take the criticism, and rather than actually trying to learn from people's critique, um instead being like, well, you just don't understand it. You just don't understand
Right,
my work. It's too deep
right.
or something. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. And while I'm
So,
not directly like calling out the particular person who runs that Twitter account or, the entirety of the team who does the PR work, it's still representative of Eggnut, and that should
Yeah.
have
hmm
some
yeah.
responsibility behind it.
Yeah.
I understand that there's a whole I like marketing. There was a whole thing a few years ago where like Burger King, Wendy's, and all the fast food joints had beef on Twitter, and people were enjoying it because it was kind of like this. Oh, we personified them, and now they're yelling at each other.
Mhm.
Like I get that, right? And it sold for a while, and people were kind of into it when it was cool for the 15 minutes of fame that it had. But like this, this just seems like there's a bunch of vitriol to kind of avoid a core concept of your game needs work,
Yeah.
and it really needs to be addressed.
Yeah. And so going back to let's go ahead and like slightly transition to another topic with like how Matt was talking about how they just the players don't understand the work. Let's go ahead and understand the work because through our research, we know what the dev's intent was now. And so at first we thought that the game was a whole bunch of separate cases that were Frankenstein together to form a plot because they transitioned to a linear structure. And that still could be the case. We don't know that for sure. We also thought that Disco Elysium might have influenced production to the point where they completely changed gears, which again might also be the case to some degree. To some degree, we don't know, but we know what the devs' intent was with the game now. We know why they went with this story structure and with the artifact twist and why they wanted us to go in with no expectations. And I have some tweets again that I'd like to highlight. So one of the tweets, someone asked, why is it mixed, referring to the review score on Steam. That's very undeserved. And Backbone responded with, quote, people expected a detective game. We gave them an existential crisis instead. Sunglasses emoji. Another tweet that I want to highlight is, let me try to find it. Okay. So someone said, I think people aren't used to tragedies anymore, especially ones that destroy so much of their progress and leave them wishing for a better ending. Howard deserves better, but he and we are entitled to nothing. And Backbone responded with, just like in real life. Wow. And then I also want to highlight two other things from the Overload interview that the developers said. They said that the reason why multiple approaches to situations was in the prologue but not in the base game, but not in the rest of the game, was because they wanted to hammer home the theme of lack of choice. And they also said at one point that the lack of gameplay, even though it wasn't their intention, one thing they did acknowledge was more gameplay probably would have been good. But they said that the lack of gameplay actually works well with the themes they were trying to convey. And they also, in the developer commentary live stream that I talked about earlier, something they had said was they wanted to try something new with the pacing of the game. So the reason why I bring all of this up is because it is evidence to me that points to the intent of trying to simulate an existential crisis. That's what they were trying to do with the game and the twist and everything. So, like the developer said, multiple ways to approach solutions are present in the prologue, but they were removed to hammer home the theme of lack of choice. The reason why everything was thrown out, like all of the plot threads thrown out, Renee, the like cannibalism, everything after Howard gets taken over by the artifact, is because it is supposed to be an existential crisis. They wanted to simulate this crisis both story-wise with the pacing and mechanics-wise with getting rid of choice, by getting rid of player choice. And so I played devil's advocate, and this is the discussion we're going to have now. I asked myself, does the game, setting aside all of the stuff with the Kickstarter and the dev response and stuff like that, does the game accomplish its goal? Does the game successfully simulate an existential crisis? And is that conveyed to the player? And does it make the player feel an existential crisis? In my opinion, and this is, from this point, I feel like this is subjective, because this is why the review score is mixed. For some people this works, for some people it doesn't. In my subjective opinion, it does not work. And so I want to before I give my reasons, I want to pass this on to you guys. Do you think that the game successfully simulates an existential crisis? Does the game live up to what the devs intended it to do?
Absolutely not.
No, not one bit.
I will give you a very good reason why. Initially, when you started off this segment, you had mentioned how the devs had said that they wanted to kind of give the idea of the lack of choice or the illusion of choice the further in you got in the game. You might not have played it before, but it's kind of an indie underground Undertale. And the reason I bring up Undertale, I know it seems very cliche and whatnot, but choices are core in that game. if you look up any of the little advertisements and like I guess you could call them like little commercials,
Hmm.
for the game explaining what it is, your player choice has core impact on the story and what ends up happening. Oh, excuse me. Towards
Let's
the
hear.
ending. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And a lot of what goes on in Undertale is directly based on your character and what you want to do with the people you interact with, or monsters rather. And it's very compelling. The reason that Undertale was so popular back in 2015 when it came out is because it gave you the question of, do you want or need to fight the creatures you interact with? It was a game that gave you the option to say, you don't have to fight them. It's an RPG game where you can be peaceful. You can choose to just be like, you know what? Okay, this creature approaches me, and the little stuff comes up, the little heads up display, and it says, oh,
Hmm.
you can fight or give them mercy. And you can just go with that, and there's options, and sometimes it's not just, oh, I don't want to do anything, I run away. Sometimes you just have to get involved with it and be like, oh, I want to sing to this one because it seems lonely, or I want to hug this one. Or there's other things like I think there's like a macho horse with like a mermaid tail, and like to pacify them, you have to like flex in front of them and stuff. It's funny, but it's the point of, you get the option to be
Hmm.
peaceful, and you have that route if that's what you want to go with.
Yeah.
Or you can completely kill everybody you see. That's an option too. But with that option, there is backlash. The game will criticize you for it. In fact, Sans Undertale, the biggest meme that came out of that entire thing, his name's just Sans, not Sans Undertale. But point being, when you go that genocide route, you end up fully fighting him. And
Hmm.
he's one of the hardest bosses in the entire parts of the game. And he's incredibly hard. But the fact that the game even thought about this, and this is like a whole different element to that genre, that your choices matter, and that you
Hmm.
could really bring out the emotions of a player by making them think about, huh, should I really attack this person?
Well,
That was
Backbone,
intense.
bringing this back to Backbone,
Oh,
Backbone
I'm
was trying
going
to
to.
focus on lack of choice.
Oh, I'm going to. Because
Okay.
yeah, no, there's a point to this. The reason I brought up Undertale first was to establish that this is where this next game came from. The sequel being Deltarune, which is an anagram of Undertale, which is funny. But
Hmm.
the more recent Toby Fox game, and there's only 2 chapters of it out at the filming of this, but the reason that this one hits hard is because Undertale was praised and universally loved because of the fact that you had these different choices.
Hmm.
Deltarune's different because on the outset, it literally tells you in the first few frames of text, your choices do not matter. And no matter what you do, even though it plays like an Undertale type game, even though it acts like an RPG where you can choose to fight people or just leave things alone, there's always something going on that kind of drives you a certain direction. And while that sounds like it's kind of a bad concept for a game, it's still compelling because it's the idea of those lack of choices and where that leads you to want to change that. And that's where the player gets involved, where everything that you are forced to do has consequences, but you can
Hmm.
still take choices in the game to try to come up from that. The problem with Backbone's version of this is that it completely rails you. There is no other option to make you seem or have that intense feeling of, oh my God, oh my God, I don't have any options anymore. There is none of that when it comes to the point of where they want to have the twist when the artifact comes in or leading up to it. There's
Yeah.
none of that feeling. It's just confusing. Everything up until that point has been on rails anyway. For the most part, you don't get any freedom to lose.
Mm-hmm.
It would mean so much more if the player had these other options to say, well, hey, maybe I like Just throwing out an example off the top of my head. Maybe during the scene where you're looking over evidence, you say, you know what? I really think that this could be bad for us if we keep this evidence. I'm going to go and dispose of it and burn it or something,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you go, okay, I'm getting rid of this. And it's a choice you make, right?
Hmm.
It's something that
Yeah.
you're able to do.
Yeah, you can't hammer home the theme of lack of choice if the concept of choice doesn't even exist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when it comes to that point, I felt it while watching. I'm sure Leo felt it while playing. It just seems like, okay, what are we doing now? What is this? You don't
Yeah.
get an existential crisis. You you're just confused. And while confusion is a part of probably I've never had one myself, but I'd imagine that it's an element to having an existential crisis. But I would imagine that it's more along the lines of like, why do I exist? What is my point and purpose?
Yeah.
Why do I have to continue to live? Like it gets to a point of like rough thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly.
Hmm.
And
So
yeah.
if you're going to have that, you better have the amount of emotional feedback to fuel it.
Yeah.
If there isn't any, you don't get that impact feeling, which I did feel in Deltarune and in Undertale, because they set it up to be a point where, okay, you've had all these options from square one. Even the years later when Deltarune came out, you expected this kind of gameplay, which was very similar to the first one.
Yeah.
But once
Hmm.
you started playing, you realized, yeah, the combat's similar, the story's a little bit different, but everything seems to be guiding you to certain points. And
Hmm.
that's where the intrigue comes in. Where are
Yeah.
we going with that intrigue? In Backbone, it was more of less, let's just like, instead of going on a roller coaster and being like, where's this next turn coming? Oh boy, I don't know what's coming up next because anything could happen. It's more of, oh my God, please just end it. I don't know where the hell
Yes.
we're going. Oh
Yeah.
my Lord. Your arms are up, but they're being carried by the force of the ride itself and not you going, woo! You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Yeah. That's a funny
Yeah.
I,
picture.
I
No.
know I ramble a lot, but that is, for me, that's the key to why I don't think that they're trying to say like, oh, we wanted to give the impression of not having choice. Then give us choice.
Yes.
Then remove it.
Exactly. Exactly. You can't have lack of choice without choice. You can't.
Exactly.
You can't. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
just what Backbone does just does not work. Like it. I think you mentioned Leo at some point that the developers said uh, the lack in gameplay actually goes well with the whole lack of choice like
Mm-hmm.
theme, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work though, because if you take out everything, take out choice, take out all that stuff, then all you're left with is something that's not deep at all, but instead is nothing. Like it's rather than exploring lack of choice, it just becomes boring, you know?
Yeah.
And so if you want to explore lack of choice, you need even more content in there that actually makes it feel emotionally like there are no choices. And you do that, like Gino said, by giving choices, by showing that choice exists, you know? This doesn't show you that choice exists and there is no choice. Like, it doesn't show the concept of no choice. It just
Yeah.
holds your hand throughout the way. And so it
Exactly. And
doesn't show anything. It doesn't show the profound thing of no choice. It just holds your hand so that there is no choice.
yeah, like this I completely agree with both of you, and this is something that I want to touch on as well. Um Using a mechanic once is not enough. Like there are ways to make mechanics uh either like having players be either emotionally invested or emotionally reliant on a mechanic. Like to bring up something like another example that isn't choice related. Whenever horror games take away your flashlight or take away your weapons, games are makers of horror games are usually smart enough to have that happen like either halfway or 2/3 through the game, after having you rely on light or weapons the entire rest of the time, so that you feel the horror more and the tension more when that stuff is taken away. You feel that the absence of those mechanics, and you feel relief when it is given back to you. Here, because it is only used once and it is used in the prologue, it just feels like something that was in there to help market the game. There is not a theme that is conveyed there. All you feel is confusion as to why all of this stuff was thrown out, because it's never used again past the first like hour of the game. So by the time the twist comes around, you are already used to not having multiple ways to approach situations in the story. You are not invested in that mechanic enough to feel its absence when it's supposedly pulled out, like in any emotional sense. And so like the whole concept is like the ending is extremely nihilistic. That's like an extension of this. It's approaching existentialism from a very nihilistic point of view, where it is saying that the reason why they throw out all of the plot points is because they want to tell you that nothing matters. And the reason why Howard dies at the end is because they want to tell you that we are entitled to nothing. Nothing matters. And no matter what we do to try to change ourselves or the world around us, nothing will change. We ultimately have no control. And no matter who we are, we die at the end. If they wanted to convey that from a mechanical perspective, they completely failed. 100%. Another reason why I don't think this works is coming from the other side. The writing just is not strong enough to support it. Like from the mechanical perspective, now flipping on its head to the story perspective of it, trying to give you an existential crisis from a story-based sense. The writing just is not strong enough to support what they were trying to do. And what's more, they said they wanted to do something new with pacing that hasn't been done before. Doing something new does not make it good. Something I can relate, another game that learned this lesson the hard way, that's not story related, is Battlefield 2042, when they ditched the traditional class system and did specialists instead, and everyone hated it and everyone criticized them for it. I mean, sure, you can commend them for doing something new, but that doesn't necessarily make it good. It's the same case here. Like writing a story with a new type of pacing, like, it doesn't make the pacing any less bad. And so, like, granted, this was something we hadn't done before, or we hadn't seen before, and, like, I could see a scenario where this type of pacing could have worked, but again, you would need to have more emotional investment in what is going on. And you would need to be more invested in the characters. So going back to a point that I've brought up repeatedly, both last episode and in this episode, it is whether or not, I feel like it's very important here as well, whether or not the existential crisis works is extremely dependent. I might even go so far as to say it is solely dependent on whether or not you are attached to Howard, and whether or not you find him a compelling character, and whether or not you are attached to him. So if you are not, like, I do not think this theme was conveyed properly at all, but if you don't have that attachment to Howard, you're going to get that theme even less. It's just going to feel confusing that everything else was thrown out. So how do you guys feel about that? From the flipping from mechanics to story and the writing, um, how do you feel
I
about these themes and how they were conveyed from a writing and storytelling perspective?
I I agree with what you were saying. With Howard, you need to like Howard in order to actually feel anything in this game, but the writing there's not enough character development for Howard. And the fact that his voice is inconsistent just makes it kind of like the game that Gino was saying before, where it's like, oh, when is this over? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's just the writing, I would say, does not support the game that they wanted to make. And I I want to touch on a little bit what you said about the pacing,
Mm-hmm.
because yes, new is not necessarily better. It is always good to try new things though. And in this case, the new definitely was not better. But I think they could make it better if they listen to criticism.
Yeah, like
You know what I mean?
there is
And so like
definitely.
just because the new isn't necessarily better, they could make it better and do something like learn something about a new pacing format if they want to by listening to criticism. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
like
so yeah,
there.
just right now though, as it is, the story does not support the themes that they wanted to do, and the pacing doesn't support it either.
Yeah, like there is a way to tell this story and tell it well.
Yes.
Like the story of a man who is slowly stripped of everything. Like all of his relationships, his job, his home. Like Howard is stripped of all of those things until he basically has nothing. To the point where he is questioning his own beliefs, he is questioning his own life and whether or not it has a point. He is like questioning everything he knows and transforming him, and like his body, his self is being both literally and figuratively transformed. That is a story that exists both in other stories and in real life, and it is a compelling one,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe told through a more traditional sense. Like, and like there are scenarios where yes, like you have, it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a story where like the person loses all of this stuff slowly over time. There are situations where you have all of this stuff and then a single event takes it all away and you are left with nothing in a heartbeat. And like there are compelling ways to tell that type of story. But I feel like why it doesn't work here is because it's just not set up that way. There is nothing in the story leading up to this point that sets you up for something like this. And like I'm the reason why I'm having trouble is because I get that like it can work. Like theoretically, nothing in life will set you up for an existential crisis. Theoretically, what I said earlier about like Renee being there could have grounded the story. If you lose if you lose the things in life that are grounding you, there could be a situation where like you feel completely lost with nothing to attach, with nothing to hold on to, nothing to rely on, nothing to ground you. Like all of that can happen and can be told in a compelling way. So I guess like go ahead, like feel free to help me out here. Why does it not work here? Like why like all of the stuff being ripped away, this type of story where you don't have anything grounding you. You have no preparation for what is coming, and like you're questioning whether anything means anything. Why does it not work here where it works in other mediums?
because there's point to it.
Yeah. Plus, you care about it.
Because, like I said earlier with like Undertale and Deltarune, the mechanics of the game lend credence to having that ripped feeling from you. You need to have some form of development over time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could argue that with Howard, you kind of experience the world through his lens and his character and his speech. And you get used to him over the course of the time that you play as him. But here's the catch. You don't really play as Howard, you play as someone who views Howard. And the reason I say that is because if you really did play as Howard, the writing would have been a lot tighter.
Mm-hmm.
There would have been a lot more moments where, you know what would really help the game, and this is just an example of a moment that would really help.
Mm-hmm.
What if we could go back to his apartment and call his mom? Like, actually go through and be like, you know what? We keep getting these random things of call mom, call mom. Even when he first got infected with the artifact, but just before he killed Anatoly, he went through that whole like road of warped sense and psyche.
Mm-hmm.
Call mom was on the huge display in the movie theater as like this big message. We never really get to do that. Renee does that at the end, and it's just kind of ham-fisted.
He does call his mom at one point, like right
Isn't that in the
after.
prologue?
No, when he's at Renee's place, and he
Oh, yeah.
when he calls three people. He calls the otter who gave him the initial infidelity case, and tells her that she should, like, you have the option to tell her go to the police, or you basically don't tell her what happened. You call his mom, and then you call Anatoly for a taxi. But and the conversation with the mom is like talking about, yes, I'm okay, I have a job, I'm not going to come over to deal with the spiders and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I do wish there had been more development there, though.
No, absolutely, and that's my point. But here's the thing. When you get to that point of being able to call his mom, was that your choice? Or does it happen naturally through the railroad effect?
I actually don't know. I can check
Because
really
as
quick.
far as I understand, that just seems like a story beat that you can't avoid. I'm talking about an actual point where you can travel between the areas on the maps, go back to the apartment after like a day of investigations, and then like sit down and have the option to call your mom. Right?
Yeah.
And that not only grounds his character, but gives you the idea of having him as an overarching character that's more than just what you see on screen. Because ripping your character away from the abilities that they have, even if they're not, intrinsically overall valuable because there's so little you can do in this game, that element has to be done with some form of previous identity. Howard does not have that. We have an idea of what he does as a PI through the very first introduction during the prologue when he's talking to the otter.
Mm-hmm.
But other than just a brief gist of, okay, he's a PI, he's taking on cases, he has a history of this, that's about it, right? There is nothing else besides maybe like Harry, if that's his name. Is it Harry?
His friend Larry.
Larry. Gosh, I'm remembering other names from different shows and shit. The point being, and maybe Anatoly, that's it. But we barely get to interact with them. And even when we do get to interact with Larry, it's just this kind of passive, like, you're a person and you should feel good. Like, during the campfire stuff when he's infected. But, like, if you're going to rip something from the character and give that sense of hopelessness, give that sense of dread, give that sense of, oh no, what am I doing? What am I into now? You really have to connect with that character, like you said, Leo.
Mm-hmm.
The connection between the player and Howard is one that isn't intrinsically given, it's one that's forced. Because you don't have the option to do anything else with him. It's just whatever the game tells you to do, you do it. You, the player, are along for the ride. If it was the other way around, where you could choose where Howard goes and does all sorts of different things, it would be a lot more intrinsic because
Well,
it would be you with Howard instead of Howard forcing you.
even okay, I will say even with a story without choice, like for example, just an interactive narrative, there are ones out there where the themes still hit home. Like you don't necessarily with the theme that they were trying to explore, I think they needed choice, but you don't necessarily need choice in order to care about a character. And
Fair.
so if even without without no choice being in the game, or am I saying that right? Even without choice being in the game,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
like you still needed to care about Howard for this to work. And if you don't care about Howard, then it just doesn't work. And I like
Yeah.
what you said before, Gino, about we are not Howard. We are observers viewing a moment in Howard's life, you know? And so
Essentially.
we need to be able to care about Howard or else the entire story just does not work. And like you were saying, Leo, there are stories about um people having everything stripped from them, and you do care about those characters, whether it be a character in a movie, in a book, in just any other media format. Like there are stories where you care about those characters, not even necessarily a game,
Mm-hmm.
but it works because you care about those characters. And like even if they wanted to tell the story in a non-traditional format, which I'm completely okay with, because like you should always be experimenting with writing and trying to make something new and interesting. Um, but you still need to make an emotional connection with the character so that people actually care about what's going on, you
Yeah.
know?
And like to make something else clear, I personally love existential stories. Um I find them to like hit home for me, and like some of my favorite games have done existential themes incredibly well. Games like Disco Elysium, Outer Wilds, Night in the Woods, and Near Automata, just to name a few off the top of my head, deal with themes similar to this and deal with them in a way that is much more nuanced and just hits harder because you either care about the characters or are invested in the story. And like so I don't want it to come across as like I just don't like this theme. I love these themes. I just don't think that Backbone is a good portrayal of them or exploration of them.
Mhm.
Um So we've been recording for a while, but we are down to our last topic. I want to briefly touch on the present and like the future of the Backbone series, because as we have said, they Eggnut is making a prequel to Backbone, and ironically, uh, last week we finally got details on what it is going to be. It's going to be called Tales, spelled Tails, the Backbone Preludes. And we all looked at the Steam page for it. And, well, I guess, do we want to discuss what we thought the prologue, or not the prologue, what we thought the prequel was going to be, or like what we would want to see in a prequel? Or do we just want to jump into what we're getting?
Oh, let's just get into what we're getting. We
Okay.
could talk about what
Yeah.
we wanted to have out of it once we get established what's going to have happened based on what we
Yeah.
know so
Okay.
far.
Yeah.
So there isn't a lot to go on. We saw there's a new trailer and some screenshots. Um, the general premise for what the game is offering is you are going to be playing as four different characters in this game: Howard, Renee, Clarissa, and someone new named Eli. You are going to be playing through like mini vignettes in their life and make decisions for them at those different points in their lives. There is going to be a like branching choice tree where you can make choices at certain events, and it'll show there's like an actual tree, or like diagram or whatever you want to call it, that shows you the different paths you can take, and it's supposed to be replayable. Um, in terms of you can make different choices to see different outcomes. You can encounter like randomized events. So yeah, it's offering a lot more player choice. It's offering these like replayable vignettes, randomized events. It's promising interactive everything, mundane tasks, cleaning up, feeding your lizard, repairing or vandalizing a city landmark. It says it offers a wide range of interaction to immerse you in its world. So, yeah. Right away from this, I think it's promising. Like, to give my thoughts on it and to kind of start off the conversation, something that I wanted to see in a Backbone sequel, that I said, like, when I first finished the game on YouTube, is something that's present here. Playing as multiple characters. I thought that was, if they were, I didn't know they were going to make a prequel at that time. I thought they were going to make a sequel, but I thought being able to play as multiple characters was going to help the game immensely. Because you'd get to see multiple sides to the city. I thought if they did a sequel, you could play as Renee doing the like revolution and doing more like espionage stuff, and then you could also play as a smuggler smuggling people over the wall and tell like that side of the story. That's obviously not what we're getting, but I think the like being able to explore the like stories of multiple characters is already a step in the right direction. Um Beyond that, the only gameplay they show off is you're putting a record on a record player in one scene in the trailer. There's a photo mode, which is, they say it's an unlockable photo mode where you can share your captures of the game's beautifully crafted pixel art world. So it's an unlockable mode, but we don't know how much it's going to factor into the game itself. And then there's a screenshot of you as Renee feeding a lizard. Those are the only instances of actual gameplay we see. And then we also see it shows off the dialogue choices, or like the choice tree. But you can see at the end it like starts off as one thing, as like one tree, one branch at the top, and then it goes into like three, and then I think two choices off screen, and then it'll end in a singular choice, which makes sense because this is a prequel. We know where these stories are going. We know at the very least where they have to end up. And so they might be leaning into similar themes as the first game. This may be existential stuff, choices. It doesn't really matter where you end up. It's all going to be the same. Because this is a prequel, I think it might work better here than it did in Backbone, because the precedent is already set. Because we already know that these characters have to end up in a specific spot, I feel like the game has an opportunity to explore those themes better. Just because, yeah, like I said, the precedent is set because this is a prequel. So what do you guys think of all of this, from the like little bits of gameplay to the multiple characters to the branching dialogue tree, or not dialogue but like choices? What are your guys' overall thoughts on everything?
I'm not holding my breath.
You're not holding your breath?
No. And the only reason it
That's
is
fair.
because as of right now, we've spent a good, I don't know, when the video is going to be, cut up and everything else. But in general, I think we spent a good 8 hours, close to at least, in unedited footage, or audio rather, just criticizing this game to its absolute limit. I mean,
Fair.
you know, it, it's one of those things where, yes, I'm always looking for a comeback story with these types of developers, with these types of games that end up being these mixed pieces, mixed bag rather. And I want them. Ultimately, I would love to have a game really show what these devs are capable of and end up being something that everyone can enjoy. That's the goal of pretty much every dev team, I think. And I would love to be able to say, yeah, this game right here, this is a comeback of all comebacks. I love it. I want that to happen. Don't get me wrong. But after every single thing we've discussed, after all that has happened with the first game, and especially given the amount of backlash and criticism that gets deflected and the way they handled their time and development team and the way they went about trying to circumnavigate things and everything else that we've discussed, I really just I want to be hopeful. I so desperately want to be hopeful for a team like this, especially a smaller team. You know, I really want to give them credit. But after everything that's happened so far, I just can't do it. I need to see the game in its final form, no prequel, nothing. I want to do what they said that we should do in the first game, judge it off of nothing else. And once the game fully comes out and people are able to show reviews for it, or if Leo, you decide to buy it and play it in its full form, I'll take a look at it and I'll judge it for what it is. But I'm not going to sit there and be excited for something that we've criticized for a good 6 to 8 hours and gotten to a point where we've talked about the entire team itself and how they handled criticism and everything else. And if they're not going to learn from their past mistakes and they're just trying to continue with a narrative that they're going to be, oh, it's existentialism and we're going to trick you and everything else and da da da, that only works once.
Yeah.
And I really don't think I understand where you're coming from, where having that type of choices don't matter makes sense. And yes, it would make sense during this, given that this is a prequel to an already established game. That's fine. Just do it well and say that outright. Say that this is going to be something that's going to continue the themes of the first game and is going to show you why that's important. Just be upfront, be honest about it, and take the criticism seriously.
Yeah.
If this game ends up being the same way that the first one is, then what did you learn?
Yeah, it is worth saying that the developers have said that they have taken feedback into account.
But are you
But
going to
we don't
implement it?
know.
That's the catch.
Yes, we don't know what feedback they've taken into account. We don't know if they'll just from the gameplay perspective, especially. Yeah, we just don't know. It's kind of a big question mark at this point. Matt, what are your thoughts?
So I'm very much once again with Gino on this one. What they're promising sounds a lot like what the first game should have had. And so we spent so long talking about what went wrong with this game and just all of the dev response and the whole listening to or not taking criticism well. We've gone through all of this. And if they listen to criticism, then great. I genuinely hope that they make a good game. But I would need to see some reviews and some stuff before I actually went out and bought it.
Yeah.
Because it's very much based on how this first one went. I would not trust the other one until I saw a review about it, until I maybe saw a playthrough with it. I do genuinely hope though that they've learned from this game and can now make a better game for it. And the dialogue tree in it, not the dialogue tree, jeez Louise. The
Choice tree.
choice tree. Yes, the choice tree does give me a little bit of hope, just because if they want to hammer home that theme of lack of choice, like we were saying before, it's good to give choices. Um, and I agree with you, Leo, that the characters all have to end up at one point because it's a prequel, and so they all have to end up at some point, that's um
That ties
that
into the
is
base game.
that ties into the base game. Thank you. Um, and so that could be a good opportunity to show that whole lack of choice theme that they wanted to do in the first one, but did not do. So, like I said, I want to have hope. I have a little bit of hope because of that choice tree, but like if their response, if how the first game went and their response to the mixed reviews are any indication, then I'm not sure if I can hold out hope for it. At the very least, I would have to see some sort of review or gameplay before I got this game.
Yeah, like I'm the same way. I am not going to buy this game right off the bat. Um, if anything, like I might get it on Game Pass if it comes to Game Pass and if I get Game Pass. But chances are this game is going to be $25 again, and I'm not spending $25 on another game in the Backbone series. I
Yeah.
had already got burned from the first game. I like I said, I it is like I feel like they are taking steps in the right direction with the multiple characters, with like even introducing a new character, Eli. Eli, they've said is going to be a scientist, which probably means we're going to get more lore into the artifacts, which is good because it's lore that is sorely missing from the first game. Um, but like this game is promising a lot, like randomized events, interactable everything, gameplay. Like we've seen so little gameplay, but it's like they need gameplay here, I feel like.
Hmm.
And like when it comes to my feelings on the choices, I think it's good. I don't know if a like choice grid or chart or whatever is necessarily necessary because it's not like every branch on top leads to the other choices. Like it's not like Detroit Become Human where this choice will branch to these specific choices and this choice will branch to these specific choices. Based on how the grid is structured, it looks like you can make any choice, like any of the three choices you make in the first section can lead to any of the three choices you can make in the second section. You are not locked to a route based on the choices you make, which tells me that the choices will have either in the moment or dialogue or like small consequences, but it won't be consequences enough to physically lock you into anything, which can be a good thing or bad thing depending on how it works. Like, and it's not necessarily a bad thing that, yeah, that you can take any route you want and it will end up in the same place. Like Red Strings Club, a game that I played about a year ago on the channel, did something similar where you had the thread that could go in different directions, but ultimately it would end up in the same place no matter what you did. And you could, like, at different points, like, I don't believe you were ever locked into a route based on the choices you made in that game. And I loved Red Strings Club. So this formula can work. Um, I just don't know. It'll just have to depend on whether or not they can pull it off. The writing quality will make or break this game. If they don't fix the issues with the writing, no matter how much gameplay there is, I feel like the game will fail. And like it might be a mixed thing again, where some people love the writing and some people hate the writing. But I do feel like the writing needs improvement. And I actually, something that I was hoping they would do before they officially announced the prequel was I was actually hoping they would go a more Night in the Woods route, where Night in the Woods, you have influence over the conversations, and like you kind of have direction over the conversations, or like what May says, but you never have control over May's personality. um, May always stayed her own character the entire time. And I was kind of hoping they would do the same thing here because, in my opinion, giving the players quote unquote emotional agency over Howard in the first game ended up hurting the game more than it helped it. But that is not the case. You can see in the choices, like in the trailer, it says like Clarissa aspired to be cunning when she grew up. And in one of the screenshots, you can see Renee decided to be caring and empathetic. So you are making. Well, I guess that's not indicative of making choices for their personalities. It can be like just choices on how you react to situations, specific situations. That's not necessarily indicative of making personality choices. But I think I would have liked to have seen uh direction over conversation more than personality, just so the characters have room to be their own characters instead of semi blank slates that we have control over. I would much rather have no control over any of the characters' personality and just learn about who they are through the storytelling. How would like what do you guys think about that?
I think ultimately, and this is not meant to like degrade what you're saying here, but yes, I would love to have them take routes that would make sense with the story and kind of give those individual characters moments to shine and to allow them to have that type of Night in the Woods content where you get used to the characters, they have their own way of doing things, and you are not going to influence to the point where that changes too much about them, but rather how they react to certain things, but they're always still on their base,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing that I have to tell them, if for whatever reason they got this far in and decided to keep watching, show don't tell. That's my big thing. Show me.
Mm-hmm.
Show me what you got, show me what you have, and show me that you're going to learn from this. Because all that we've discussed thus far won't mean a single thing if, one, they haven't learned from the criticism, two, they continue to go on this, like, again, don't know for 100%, but we do know that they had a really rough, tight crunch schedule near the end of the first game. So everything that we brought up thus far could be completely undermined by another crunch schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Fix that. And third of all, whoever you got responding to your Twitter stuff, make sure you reel them in, you know? But ultimately, I know earlier on I got heated a little bit and I was kind of getting angry. I understand that. But it comes from a place where I want to respect this company, I want to respect these games, and I want to respect the people behind the games. But it becomes very hard to when the apathy behind it becomes very more apparent than where people who do care just as much as I do about it try to say something to say, hey, look, this is where you could improve, and they just shut you down.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to give them an extra chance to do stuff, but I'm still not holding my breath because I'm used to it by now. A lot of people are used to just games just not doing well, and I hate that. And part of it is, growing older and being a little bit more cynical and maybe just, being like, oh, okay, great, this happened.
You're a
But
grumpy old man.
yeah, at the age of 25. But my point to it is that if this game is to succeed, if Eggnut is to succeed, they need to listen to all that feedback. They need to be able to change their development team and the way they handle things, and they need to be able to show, not tell. Because right now they're telling a lot of stuff on that Steam page, but they're not showing enough. It's okay if you just introduce this stuff and are slowly piecing things together. Take your time.
Mm-hmm.
But please, I have faith that you can make changes. I believe anybody can make changes. Second chances are my thing, man. I'm
Yeah.
going into therapy. Like I if I didn't believe that people couldn't change, then I would not be interested in the therapeutic route,
Mm-hmm.
right? But ultimately, it's that change that's going to matter for them. And I want to see it from them. I want to see them succeed. I want to see them do well, but you have to show me. That's the key.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that this game was shown off at the latest PAX event. I don't remember if it was PAX East or PAX West that just happened, but there was a playable demo available at that event. And the developers have hinted on Twitter that that demo might be making it to Steam. Um, I'll play it. I don't know if I'll play it on the channel, but I will play the demo if it's free. But I will not be going in to the full game thinking that the demo is any indication of what I'm going to be getting. Because yeah, I've been burned once before, and like if the developers want to like improve over the first game, I think it's really important that they are much more transparent and much more straightforward with what the game is going to deliver. And to their credit, they aren't doing Kickstarter for this one. They are purely using funding probably from their publisher and the funds they've made off the first game. They aren't crowdfunding this one, which I think was a good route. I think they might have received there no doubt would have been backers because a lot of people like the game, but I feel like there would have been some backlash from people if they had used Kickstarter again for this prequel. But yeah, they need to be straightforward. They need to communicate about what it's going to be, what is going to be in the game. And if they want to be secretive, like if they want us to go in with no expectations, like they wanted people for the first game to go in with no expectations, don't release a demo. Don't release, like, besides that first trailer, don't release any other marketing for this game. Just like give updates on where you are in development and then release the game and let people form their own opinions. Because as soon as you I hope that the developers learned this lesson, as soon as you release a demo, as soon as you start showing off the game and marketing the game, you are setting expectations. And like now I know that like I can't take those expectations at face value because again, the first game burned me, but there was no precedent set for it. And again, because the precedent is set, the potential for this game to do better is good. There's potential there. Show off what you be very careful about what you show off and just make sure that if regardless of whether or not you want to set expectations, make sure that you are doing what you need to do to make sure the player knows what's coming, or like I said, doesn't know what's coming. But yeah, there's a right way and a wrong way to do marketing. The first game, like, I could not think of a worse way to market the first game based on what you wanted, based on what the developers wanted the player experience to be. I could not think of a worse way to market the game. I just hope they learn their lesson and they do it right here. And yeah, that's all there is to it. And please let the writing be better. And yeah, is there anything else we want to talk about? Anything else we want to mention?
Whoa. Yes, what we thought. You went to Gino. I waited my turn. I waited for what I was gonna say.
Oh, I thought you
And
had.
now you're
I
just
thought you
moving
had.
on?
I thought you had
All
talked
Uh-uh.
right,
already.
I want
let's
my
let the
chance.
man,
I want my
let's let the
chance to
man
shine.
speak. Let's
I thought you had talked. I'm sorry.
I agree with Gino. Pass turn. That was pretty much it.
Oh, okay, fair
Honestly,
enough.
Okay.
I do want them to make the characters better, and just if they want this game to be successful, they need people to care about the characters. And if that's not done, then it's not gonna work. But at the same time, because I didn't care about the characters in the last game, I don't really have any motivation to buy this one. So like, they should
Yeah.
probably go back and like honestly fix the first game. Although they did say it was done, so they probably don't want to do that.
They're not gonna
But
fix the first game. They're not gonna touch it.
anywho, that was it. I agree with Gino. Pass turn.
Okay. Well, on that note, I think we're going to go ahead and end the recording here. If you made it to the end of the episode, thank you. I really appreciate it. Please feel free to give us comments. Any and all feedback, as long as it is constructive, is welcome. And yeah, I don't know if we're going to be doing another one of these. I don't know if we do another one of these. I don't know if it's going to be on YouTube or on Spotify or something like that. But yeah, if you watched both parts, thank you so much. You have no idea how much that means to me. Thank you, Gino and Matt, for coming on and discussing this game with me and for trying this little experiment out with me on the channel.
Of course.
Yeah, no problem, man.
And yeah, that's about it. Maybe if you want to see another one of these, please let me know, because that will greatly influence whether or not I decide to make another one. But letting me know that you actually want to see this stuff, I will listen to it. But yeah, other than that, maybe I'll make more reviews in the future. We'll see what happens. But until then, have a good one. I will see you next time. And yeah, bye.
Bye, everyone. Woo!
Bye.
Gino, where's your bye?
Just say bye.